All right, are we working? Sorry, everyone. Hectic times. How's it going, everyone? Jasper, welcome to the Hot Tamales. Welcome to the Hot Tamales. Okay, sorry, I was delayed because I'm trying to find out. I was trying to stream this to Twitch as well. I'm trying to do a dual stream, but I was having issues with a GitHub file that I was trying to get onto this, and I'm dark. It's darker. It's lighter. That should be a little better. Are we live? Are we working? How's everyone doing? How y'all doing? Also, everyone like to stream? No, I was trying to stream it on Twitch, but let me see if I can do this real quick. Add new target. Modify. I know I want to modify this target. Stream key. You got an ad when you came back. I was trying to dap up the microphone. What's up, dude? I gotta figure out the URL for. No, I want to stream on Twitch. Twitch. Output. Also, real quick, I need you guys to wait. Reuse the stream at the encoder. Yes. I was using. I think I was. I'm not using the Stream Elements one. I'm using just the GitHub one. OBS multi RTPM. It doesn't really matter that much, but I was figuring for anybody who prefers Twitch, it'd be easy. But I don't really understand some of this. Sorry, we're all over the place right now. Probably should have figured this out earlier, but that's all right. Settings, stream. Let's try this. I don't think it's gonna work. Okay, start. Connecting. I don't think it's gonna work. It just says connecting. I don't think it's gonna work. Error, failed to connect to server. We'll figure it out another time. Unless any of you guys can help me figure this out right now. Sorry, everyone. We're going to talk about books in a bit, I promise. 1 second, I got to charge my phone. I'm all over the place. Took Wes for a walk this morning. Had to run back home to get some things done, and then we're all over the place now. Give me like 3 minutes. All right. Give me 3 minutes. I'm going to play you some good music. We'll play the Lord of the Rings intro. Because I don't want you just to watch me. Wow, my face is really bright. All right, give me a second, guys. Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to ask Reddit. Or I'll just ask. Don't tell anybody, but I'm going to ask AI for a quick second. Whee! You guys can hear me still, so I'll just still chat. think it's working. Oh my gosh. Hey, hey, we're working. All right, well, if any of you guys want to join on Twitch, it's on Twitch now too, I think. We'll see. Yeah, we're on Twitch now too. Wow, look at that. Looky look. I'm gonna open up both windows. Sorry, we are all over the place right now, guys. I'm sorry about this. No, I want to move this dock. I don't want that dock to be there. Let's put this dock right there. Oi, what a pain. All right, that looks good. Sorry, you guys don't care about any of this stuff. Trying to figure out life. Nemo. All right, everyone. Well, we're on Twitch now. Or, you know, no one's really gonna watch on Twitch, but figured why not, just for the heck of it. Okay. We're doing a Tale of Two Cities. I don't know how a Tale of Two Cities is gonna go. I'm a little nervous about a Tale of Two Cities. I had an existential crisis earlier this week, and I was like, should we do a Tale of Two Cities? Because I remember, I think when I was in high school trying to read it and like quitting within the first like 10 pages because I was so lost for what the heck was going on in the story. So I had a little existential crisis and was like, maybe we should do Great Expectations. Oh, this lighting is going to be all over the place. But we're going to still stick it out and do the good old, whatchamacallit, Tale of Two Cities. If I can get through Wuthering Heights, yeah. You think if I can get through Wuthering Heights, we can get through this? Oh, you read the first 3 chapters and you loved it. Okay, excellent, good. We have a lot of reading that we actually have to do today because I wanted to try to finish all of part 1, which is significant. It is 42 pages? That might be the most amount of reading we've done on this channel. I mean, it's not that much. It's not that much more. Yeah, I think it'll go quick. We probably have done more during a Wuthering Heights read because we were just trying to get through that book. You know what I mean? I'm glad that you liked it. That makes me excited then. Real quick, can you guys tell me, I think that this is off by a little bit. I want people who can gauge this. Are the vocals off for the video by like 1/10 of a second? Does my voice match the video? You guys know what I mean? Are they synced? I think they're off by a little bit, and it's kind of driving me crazy. I'm gonna keep talking, so I won't read too slow. As soon as we get into the story, we'll go. Well, I mean, I always say that, but you know, we don't. I know that's true. I needed a live chat when I was reading in high school for sure. It's a tiny bit desynced. Okay, I'm gonna try to fix that right now. Sorry, we're dealing with all sorts of issues right now. Let me try to fix that very quickly. Output. Where would this be? Audio. Can I delay the audio? Mute to delay. No, that's not nothing. I think it looks right, but I think it's like, honestly, I think it's like a 100th of a second delay, and it's driving me crazy. Because I think it's just been slowing down for OBS or something like that, because I've been trying to make some other videos, and I've been noticing that when I've been editing it, I'm like, that doesn't feel good. Yeah, 5. Okay, sweet. Thank you, Nemo. That actually helps significantly. In OBS, can you fix advanced audio properties? That's what I need. Okay. Sorry, guys. You guys really are great for grunting it out with me right now. Sync offset. Let's off sync the mics. Let's try 50. Let's try that. Close. Is that any better? I don't know if that's any better. I feel like that actually made it worse. Maybe negative 50. Hold on. Advanced audio properties. Close. That made it better? No, that made it worse. We're a hot mess this morning. Sync offset 50 millimeters or 50 millimeters. All right, advanced audio properties. We're just gonna slowly move up. Let's try 500 to see how really offset that is. 500 is this. It's not really doing anything. Am I missing something? Mic, aux, desktop audio, Sony, monitor, mono, close. I don't think that's really doing anything. It's really off now? Okay. Weird. It doesn't even show up in my OBS. It was better earlier. Nemo, was it better when it was plus 50 or minus 50? Sorry, everyone. This is not what you all signed up for. I'm going negative 50. I think that might fix it. Negative 50 or plus 50? I know there wasn't that much of an issue for most people, but there was a tiny bit for me when I was editing videos, and it was just driving me crazy. So I figured I'll just come on here rather than read A Tale of Two Cities. To start, we'll just do this really quick. Is that better? Is that a little bit better? Is that kind of where it should be? Is that the prime zone? Or should it be positive 50? Let me change it to positive 50. We're at negative 50 right now. Let me change it to positive. See if this is better. That might be better. I think that's better. I think that's actually I think that's the golden zone. Let me change it. No, let's just keep it there. I think we're good right there. Okay, perfect. Excellent. Thank you. Love that. I think we're good. Plus 50 is better. Agreed. Yeah. I could even tell right now. I'm going to change it to plus, no, should I change it to plus 100? Let's do it to edit audio properties. Let me do 75, not 750. I think this one might make it a little bit better. We're gonna just stick with this one for now. Okay, we're just gonna go with this. We're rolling with this. Get rid of all that. All right, now we're good. Now we're golden, guys. Now we're golden. We're set. We're all good. Yeah, these are the most annoying little changes ever. Yeah, most people aren't even watching the video. They're treating it like a podcast, so I totally understand that. But for those that aren't and that watch, the little things drive you crazy. You know what I mean? All right, well, A Tale of Two Cities. We're going to start reading A Tale of Two Cities. I don't know what to expect for this book. I have 2 copies. I accidentally had a copy, and I didn't know that. And I also bought a copy because I didn't think I had a copy. So I have 2 copies. But I'm going to do the one that I had before, my Wordsworth copy. I don't know what to expect for this. I know the ending of the story because of Batman. Because there's a scene in Batman when they're burying him that they say that line. So I kind of know how the story ends, but that's about it. Good ending. But I don't know anything that's going to happen in between. I don't really know much about Dickens, too, so we're going to see. A very wishy-washy opening line. It's one of the most famous opening lines in like all of literature. We'll see if it's wishy-washy. We'll see if the first chapter is a little wishy-washy. We'll see. I feel like there's going to be a lot of weird stuff of trying to figure out. Like English Dickens stuff. Okay, guys, we're gonna get started because we have a good amount of reading to get done today, and so we are gonna jump right in. I should put a time stamp in the video for this. All right, here we go. This is we're gonna get started. A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. This is our first Dickens for book club. I'm curious to see how the rest of it's gonna go. This is A Tale of Two Cities by Chip Dickens. This is book the first. Why did I call it book the first? Recalled to Life. Chapter 1. The Period. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. I like that he doesn't say all there. In short, the period was so far like the present period. That some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received, for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. In short, the period was so far like the present period. That some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or evil in the superlative degree of comparison only. So, really quick, hold on. Is he just saying that nothing changes and people like to compare things, and so it was the best of times, it was the worst of times back then, but it's still the same exact thing that it is today? He says, in the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or for evil in the superlative degree of comparison only. So he's just saying things like nothing changes in human history. That people say the French Revolution was the worst period in human history, but they didn't live today. And every generation. It's always the best of times, it's always the worst of times. It's always this. I kind of like that. Dickens already I'm a fan of. Just a smart dude. Human history doesn't change. All right. There were a king with a large jaw and a queen with a plain face on the throne of England. There was a king with a large jaw and a queen with a fair face on the throne of France. In both countries it was clearer than crystal to the lords of the state preserves of loaves and fishes, that things in general were settled forever. It was the year of our Lord 1775. Spiritual revelations were conceded to England at that favored period. Okay, we need to. This is interesting so far. I think this is going to be a slow read, guys. We need to dissect all these lines. Spiritual revelations were conceded to England at that favored period. as at this. Spiritual revelations? Is he essentially just saying that? Is Dickens just patting England on the back, saying that we're Anglican and therefore we're better than whatever France is at the time? Spiritual revelations were conceded to England at that favored period as at this. What is he saying? Is he just saying that, like, England is better than France? Hey, Fitz, thanks for the $6.99 Canadians. Appreciate it. New week, new book. This feels like the most English thing to say. England is favored, as they were past back then, as they are today. Spiritual revelations. I want to know what's going on in his mind when he says spiritual revelations. That seems very English of him to say. Mrs. Southcott, which my book has a footnote already in. Wait, it's a second footnote. Okay, hold on. There's 2 footnotes already. There's one by the kings and queens of France. Louis the 16th had just acceded to the French throne, while George III had been king in 1760. Okay, Mrs. Southcott, Joanna Southcott, who was born in 1750 and died in 1814, remained famous for her dreams and visions. There was a notable Life of Joanna Southcott, the prophetess, containing an impartial account of her wonderful and astonishing writings. Dickens is a little less impartial than that. Dickens a little less impartial in that he is praising her? Dickens, an author, would praise someone like that? Yeah, I got to keep reading. Otherwise, it's going to take us 5 hours to get through this first chapter. Mrs. Southcott had recently attained her 5th and 20th blessed birthday. So she's 25. Of whom a prophetic private in the Life Guards had heralded the sublime appearance by announcing that arrangements were made for the swallowing up of London and Westminster. Oh. Even the Cock Lane ghost had been laid only around a dozen years. After rapping out its messages, as the spirits of this very last year, supernaturally deficient in originality, rapped out theirs. Mere messages in the earthly order of events had lately come to the English crown and people from a congress of British subjects in America, which, strange to relate, have proved more important to the human race than any communications yet received through any chickens of the Cock Lane brood. Man, this is gonna be a deep dive. James Boswell, in his Life of Johnson, mentions the story of the ghost in Cock Lane, which in the year 1762 had gained very general credit in London, and records Samuel Johnson's satisfaction at having assisted in detecting the cheat. But what is the Cock Lane ghost? And then supernaturally deficient in originality alludes to the current vogue for table rappings seances. Interesting. In which many observers smelt fraud. Rapt may also glance punningly at the Morse messages carried by the first transatlantic telegraph cable, completed in August 1858, over which the Queen Victoria had communicated with the President Buchanan. Tom Standage gives details on pages 75 to 81 of his account of the Victorian Internet. And then we have another note. There's a lot of notes in this already. There's not a lot of notes in the rest of the book, but the first chapter, I guess, has a lot. The First General Congress of the United States of America petitioned King and Parliament in January 1775. Wow. Britannia. Dickens alludes to the sentencing and execution in 1766 of Chevalier de la Barre. Lots of weird stuff going on. Yeah, I feel like this whole thing is Dickens is saying nothing has changed. And then I think the spiritual revelations, he's saying that with sarcasm. Spiritual revelations were conceded to England at that favored period as at this. And then he's talking about all the crazy people who are having spiritual revelations and seances. So it seems a little bit nuts. Sorry, I just popped on the Twitch chat too. Sorry guys. I just saw you guys chatting. Yeah, this isn't a crossword. This is a reading. I'm gonna do a bunch of these readings on here. We'll do crosswords. We'll eventually again. So Dickens was just paid by the word, wanted to be really wordy. People's credulity and beliefs at the date the story. Okay, interesting. So people are just willing to believe in haunted houses and stuff like that. Interesting. Okay, weird. So it's a weird time in England. You know what's really interesting too? It's like Dickens is saying, like, I guess my understanding of the best of times is the worst of times is that one city, it's like a tale of two cities. One city is good and the other city is bad. But Dickens is almost painting this other city of London as being really weird as well. Like, I feel like this whole first thing is just a critique on what people say is good and bad. I had a soccer coach in high school who, whenever we were playing good and then bad, would quote this line to us at the beginning of it, or the halftime every game. And I was like, I don't know if you're using, you keep using that word. I do not know if you know what it, or what's the line in The Princess Bride? You keep using that. I do not think you know what it means, or something like that. France, less favored on the whole as to matters spiritual than her sister of the shield and trident, rolled with an exceeding smoothness downhill, making paper money and spending it, under the guidance of her Christian pastors. Interesting. She entered... Oh, weird. So... Weird. Was the French Revolution guided by Christian pastors? What is the religion of France at this time? What's the major religion of France? I don't think they're Catholic, no? I don't know. It was Catholic? Okay, interesting. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. She entertained herself, besides, with such humane achievements as sentencing a youth to have his hands cut off, his tongue torn out with pincers, and his body burned alive, because he had not kneeled down in the rain to do honor to a dirty procession of monks which passed within his view, at a distance of some 50 or 60 yards. Sorry, time out. I need to figure this out too. French Revolution was around what time? Are we in the craze of the French Revolution right now, or are we right before things? Like, is that French stuff happening? Was that the result of the French Revolution? So the French Revolution starts in 1789. So this is right before it then? This is right before the fervor. So there's a bunch of pastors who are killing people because they don't think, because commoners aren't giving them proper respect. So this is why the French Revolution is going to start. This is the run up to the French Revolution. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Man, you guys need to learn how to read books with the entire chat. This is like the greatest thing. I just have like live Google right now. This is the best. So this is this is the run up. Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm going to ask my questions to anyone and you guys just help me out. So great. This is the best. I highly recommend this, guys. Highly, highly recommend this. It is likely enough that rooted in the woods of France and Norway, there were growing trees when that sufferer was put to death, already marked by the woodman, fate, to come down and be sawn into boards, to make a certain movable framework with a sack and a knife in it. Oh, the guillotine. That's a cool way to write the guillotine. Terrible in history. It is likely enough that in the rough outhouses of some tillers of the heavy lands adjacent to Paris, there were sheltered from the weather that very day rude carts bespattered with rustic mire, snuffed about by pigs, and roosted in by poultry, which the farmer, Death, had already set to be his tumbrils of the revolution. But that woodman and that farmer, though they work unceasingly. Wait, what is that? The roosted by some poultry, which the farmer Death had already set apart to be his tumbrils of the revolution. Where they're going to put the bodies? Is that where they're just going to heap the bodies on these carts? But that woodman and that farmer, though they work unceasingly, work silently, and no one heard them as they went about with muffled tread. The rather, for as much as to entertain any suspicion that they were awake, was to be atheistical and traitorous. Or traitorous. In England, there was scarcely an amount of order and protection to justify much national boasting. Daring burglaries. There's a footnote by burglaries. I'm already really enjoying this. It's a pleasant read, even though it's a little strange. It's a pleasant read. What footnote is this? 9? Throughout this paragraph, Dickens is using, but also altering facts recorded in the Annual Register for 1775 and 1776. Daring burglaries by armed men and highway robberies took place in the capital itself every night. Families were publicly cautioned not to go out of town without removing their furniture to upholsterers' warehouses for security. The highwayman in the dark was a city tradesman in the light, and being recognized and challenged by his fellow tradesmen, whom he stopped in his character of the captain, gallantly shot him through the head and rode away. Sheesh. The mail was waylaid by 7 robbers, and the guards shot 3 dead, and then got shot dead himself by the other 4, in consequence of the failure of his ammunition, after which the mail was robbed in peace. That magnificent potentate, the Lord Mayor of London, was made to stand and deliver on Turnham Green by one highwayman, who despoiled the illustrious creature in sight of all his retinue. Prisoners in London gaols fought battles with their turnkeys, and the majesty of the law fired blunderbusses in among them, loaded with round of shots and ball. Thieves snipped off diamond crosses from the necks of noble lords at court drawing rooms. Musketeers went to St. Giles to search for contraband goods, and the mob fired on the musketeers, and the musketeers fired on the mobs. And nobody thought of any of these occurrences much out of the common way, or much out of the common way. Yeah. In the midst of them, the hangman, ever busy and ever worse than useless, was in constant requisition. Now stringing up long rows of miscellaneous criminals, now hanging the housebreaker on Saturday, who had been taken on Tuesday, now burning people in the hand at Newgate by the dozen, and now burning pamphlets at the door of Westminster Hall today, taking the life of an atrocious murderer, and tomorrow of a wretched pilferer who had robbed a farmer's boy of 6pence. All these things and 1,000 like them came to pass in and close upon the dear old year 1775, environed by them, while the woodman and the farmer worked unheeded. Those two of the large jaws, and those other two of the plain and fair faces, trod with stir enough, and carried their divine rights with their high hand. Thus did the year 1775 conduct their greatnesses, and myriads of small creatures and creatures of this chronicle among the rest, along the roads that lay before them. Funky. I kind of like this. It's weird. It's a weird combination. You have to really pay attention for this. At least I feel that. The woodman and the farmer. I want to talk about this for a second. So the woodman and the farmer are metaphors for fate and death. They're metaphors for the guillotine and the carts. But are they also the king and queens? Environed by them, while the woodman and the farmer worked unheeded. Those two of the large jaws, and those other two of the plain and fair faces, trod with stir enough, and carried their divine rights with a high hand. Yeah, the large jaws and plain faces are the monarchs, but it's still using the woodman and the farmer in that paragraph. Are they just saying the woodman and the farmer are biding their time, waiting to behead these people? And it's interesting. France seems like a place that's kind of about to go erupt in flame, and England seems like a crazy spiritual place that they're having seances, and they're having table readings and all sorts of crazy stuff. Funky. Okay, I like Dickens so far. This is it's a weird intro, but it's a good first chapter. There's just a lot to dissect that I don't quite understand. The woodman and the farmer. This is the environment in which fate and death were working behind the scenes. Okay. So, one question that I have is, they're talking about hangings. Is the reason that people used the guillotine in the French Revolution because the nobility were hanging commoners and they didn't want to hang the nobility? They wanted to do a different method of murder. Why did the guillotine become a thing? Was it just economy of murder? Like they could just kind of do one person after the other? But what's the difference between that and a hanging? Like, isn't a hanging pretty efficient too? I guess a guillotine's maybe more efficient. It's so interesting reading this in conjunction too with the Scarlet Pimpernel, or reading this after the Scarlet Pimpernel, because the Scarlet Pimpernel is painting England as this perfect paradise compared to the France, which maybe during the actual upheaval of the French Revolution it kind of was. But Dickens I feel like is doing the opposite. He's like, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, which makes me think, oh, it was the best of times in England and it was the worst of times in France. But it was I think he's going above that and saying, no, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times in both places. Both places are absolutely nuts. Maybe. Am I wrong about that? Am I right about that? Am I wrong? Yeah, efficient, more humane. Kind of makes sense. New technology, they just they like adopted a new technology. Yeah, they're excited about using it. All right. Let me put on some chapstick and then we'll do chapter 2. We got a bunch of chapters to read, so we're going to keep moving. First chapter, I'm enjoying this. People always exaggerate whenever they talk about the state of the world. Everything is always the best or worst, whichever proves their point. Totally. Oh, I'm going to make a video about that. Things are worse than they've ever been in human history. It's one of my pet peeves. Where people are like, we need this now more than ever. It's one of my least favorite phrases is now more than ever. Because no. Are you looking at all human history? Yeah, we're still like this. Yeah, Dickens is a social critic. Orczy was cheering on the system she preferred. Totally. And the English system was probably better at that time, but still. I like Dickens' social critique here. This is kind of fun. I feel like I'm going to really enjoy him. I'm really excited to read more Dickens now. Maybe this channel is just going to become a Dickens and Austen channel. We'll see. All right, we got a lot of reading to do. We're on page 6 and we have 35 pages to go. So let's keep reading. It was the Dover Road. This is chapter 2, The Mail. It was the Dover Road that lay on a Friday night, late in November, before the first of the person with whom this history has business. The Dover Road lay as to him beyond the Dover Mail, as it lumbered up Shooter's Hill. What is Shooter's Hill? Thank you for giving me a footnote. Shooter's Hill is... There's not a lot of pages of notes, but the first few pages are just a lot. Kind of the same as Austen. The hill, as its name suggests, was notorious for ambushes by highwaymen. Okay. He walked uphill in the mire by the side of the Mail. It was the Dover Road. So we're in England right now. So Dover is... Where is Dover? No, it's showing me Dover, New Jersey. Okay, so this is like the closest you can get to France. And the Strait of Dover is like, oh, okay, so Dover and Calais, those were the two things in the Scarlet Pimpernel. Interesting. That's like the closest two cities. Apparently you can see them on a clear day, right? Interesting, okay. Yeah, that's the White Cliffs of Dover. That's kind of cool. I didn't even realize that that's where they were. The White Cliffs of Dover. That's kind of crazy. That's beautiful. All right, let's keep reading. Can't get that distracted. He walked uphill in the mire by the side of the Mail, as the rest of the passengers did, not because they had least relish for walking exercise under the circumstances, but because the hill and the harness and the mud and the Mail were all so heavy that the horses had 3 times already come to a stop, besides once drawing the coach across the road with the mutinous intent of taking it back to Blackheath. I already like his writing. So this is a sentence that I really like. He goes, like, this is not how your English teachers in high school taught you to write. But he's breaking rules because he knows how to use the rules. He goes, under the circumstance, but because the hill and the harness and the mud and the Mail were all so heavy. Like, generally, writing teachers tell you to do it in odd groups, 3s and 5s. He does it in a 4, which is really interesting. And it's like a repetitive kind of thing. It's just kind of, there's some beauty to a sentence like that. I just like that. It's a good sentence. Where's Blackheath? Reins and whips and coachmen and guard, however, in combination, had read that article of war which forbade a purpose otherwise strongly in favor of the argument, that some brute animals are endued with reason, and the team had capitulated and returned to their duty. With drooping heads and tremulous tails, they mashed their way through the thick mud, floundering and stumbling between whiles as if they were falling to pieces at larger joints. as often as the driver rested them and brought them to a stand, with a weary "Whoa-ho, so-ho then." The near leader violently shook his head, and everything upon it, like an unusually emphatic horse, denying that the coach could be got up the hill. Whenever the leader made this rattle, the passenger started as a nervous passenger might, and was disturbed in mind. All right. Let's keep reading. There was a steaming mist in all the hollows, and it had roamed in its forlornness up the hill like an evil spirit seeking rest and finding none. A clammy and intensely cold mist that made its slow way through the air in ripples that visibly followed the overspread one another, as the waves of an unwholesome sea might do. It was dense enough to shut out everything from the light of the coach lamps. But these, its own workings, and a few yards of road, and the reek of the laboring horses, steamed into it, as if they had made it all. 2 other passengers beside the one were plodding up the hill by the side of the mail. All 3 were wrapped to the cheekbones and over the ears, and wore jack boots. Not one of the 3 could have said from anything he saw what either of the other 2 was like, and he was hidden almost under as many wrappers from the eyes of the mind as from the eyes of the body of his 2 companions. In those days, travelers were very shy of being confidential on a short notice, for anybody on the road might be a robber or in league with robbers. As to the latter, when every posting horse and alehouse could produce somebody in the captain's pay, ranging from the landlord to the lowest stable nondescript, it was the likeliest thing upon the cards. So the guard of the Dover Mail thought to himself, that Friday night in the November 1775, lumbering up Shooter's Hill as he stood on his own particular perch behind the mail, beating his feet, and keeping an eye and a hand on the arm chest before him, where a loaded blunderbuss lay at the top of 6 or 8 loaded horse pistols deposited on a substratum of cutlasses. Now, I've got to talk about long sentences because he uses a lot of long sentences here, and they're good long sentences. Like, there's a difference between these long sentences and the long sentences that he's using in just show my pencil, that Orczy is using. Orczy's long sentences did not seem like they held together very well. They seemed a little too fragile. Dickens' long sentences kind of stand. They got weight to them. The Dover Mail was in its usual genial position, that the guard suspected the passengers. The passengers suspected one another, and the guard, they all suspected everybody else. And the coachman was sure of nothing but the horses, as to which cattle he could clear with conscience, or he could with a clear conscience have taken his oath to the 2 testaments that they were not fit for the journey. Well, ho, said the coachman. So then, 1 more pull and you're at the top, and be damned for you, for I have trouble enough to get you to it. Joe. Hello, the guard replied. What o'clock do you make it, Joe? 10 minutes, good. Past 11. My blood, ejaculated the vexed coachman. And not atop of the Shooters yet? Get on with you. The emphatic horse, cut short by the whip, in a most decided negative, made a decided scramble for it, and the 3 other horses followed suit. Once more the Dover Mail struggled on, with the jackboots of its passengers squashing along by its side. They had stopped when the coach stopped, and they kept close company with it. If any one of the 3 had the hardihood to propose to another to walk on a little ahead in the mist and darkness, he would have put himself in a fair way of getting shot instantly as a highwayman. The last burst carried the mail to the summit of the hill. The horses stopped to breathe again, and the guard got down to skid the wheels. I'm guessing put a block in the wheels. Apply a species of brake. Okay, yeah. Skid the wheels for the descent. And the open coach door let the passengers in. Joe, cried the coachman in a warning voice, looking down from his box. What do you say, Tom? They both listened. I say a horse at a canter coming up, Joe. I say a horse at a gallop, Tom, returned the guard, leaving his hold of the door and mounting nimbly to his place. Gentlemen, in the king's name, all of you. With this hurried adjuration, he cocked his blunderbuss and stood on the offensive. The passenger booked by this history was on the coach step, getting in. The other two passengers were close behind him and about to follow. He remained on the step, half in the coach and half out of it. They remained in the road below him. They all looked from the coachman to the guard, and from the guard to the coachman, and listened. The coachman looked back, and the guard looked back, and even the emphatic leader pricked up his ears and looked back, without contradicting. I love his sentences. These are fun. Like, everyone's looking back. This is like, there's like comedic beats to this. It's kind of great writing so far. Who would have thought that Dickens is a great writer? James May flew his glider across the channel from Dover. Interesting. You can apparently see how many miles is Dover to Calais. Dickens is hilarious if you can figure out what he's talking about. Well, this whole thing feels like a comedy sketch. It's dark, or it's misty out. They can barely see things. There's a horse coming up the road that they don't know who it is. And all of a sudden it says one guy looked. And then the other guy looked. And the other guy looked back. And then now with the emphatic leader pricked up his ears and looked back, without contradicting. The stillness consequent on the cessation of the rumbling and laboring of the coach, added to the stillness of the night, made it very quiet indeed. The panting of the horses communicated a tremulous motion to the coach, as if it were in a state of agitation. The hearts of the passengers beat loud enough perhaps to be heard, but at any rate, the quiet pause was audibly expressive of people out of breath, and holding the breath, and having the pulses quickened by expectation. The sound of a horse at a gallop came fast and furious up the hill. So ho, the guard sang out, as loud as he could roar. Yo there, stand, I shall fire. The pace was suddenly checked, and with much splashing and floundering, a man's voice called from the mist. Is that the Dover Mail? Never mind you what it is, the guard retorted. What are you? Is that the Dover Mail? Why do you want to know? I want a passenger if it is. What passenger? Mr. Jarvis Lorry. Our booked passenger showed in a moment that it was his name. The guard, the coachman, and the other two passengers eyed him distrustfully. Keep where you are, the guard called to the voice in the mist, because if I should make a mistake, it could never be set right in your lifetime. Gentlemen of the name of Lorry, answer straight. What does this matter? Asked the passenger then, with mildly quavering speech. Who wants me? Is it Jerry? I don't like Jerry's voice. If it is Jerry, growled the guard to himself. Yet hoarser than suits me is Jerry. Or he's hoarser than suits me is Jerry. Yes, Mr. Lorry. What is the matter? A dispatch sent after you from over yonder. T and Co. I know this messenger, guard, said Mr. Lorry, getting down to the road. Assisted from behind more swiftly than politely by the other two passengers, who immediately scrambled into the coach, shut the door, and pulled up the window. He may come close. There's nothing wrong. I hope there ain't, but I ain't making so nation sure. There's a footnote that says, the guard's oath, oh damnation, suggests his nervous excitement. Curses, also on pages 116 and 194, would normally require an ellipsinal apostrophe or dash. I can't make so nation sure of that, said the guard in gruff soliloquy. Hello, you. Well, and hello you, said Jerry, more hoarsely than before. Come on at a foot pace. Do you mind me? And if you got holsters to that saddle, a yarn, don't let me see your hand go nigh 'em. For I'm a devil at a quick mistake, and when I make one, it takes the form of lead. So now let's look at you. The figure of a horse and a rider came slowly through the eddying mist, and came to the side of the mail, where the passenger stood. The rider stooped, and casting up his eyes to the guard, handed the passengers a small folded paper. The rider's horn was blown, and both horse and rider were covered with mud, from the hooves of the horse to the hat of the man. Guard, said the passenger, in a tone of quiet business confidence. The watchful guard with his right hand at the stock of his raised blunderbuss, his left at the barrel, and his eye on the horseman answered curtly, Sir. His right hand on the stock, so he's lefty. I don't know, this probably doesn't mean anything, but that's an interesting thing that he points out that this guy's lefty. Lead is in the element. Okay, thank you. Why is it important that the guy's lefty? Who knows? Guard, said the passenger in a tone of quiet surprise. The watchful guard, with his right hand at the stock of his raised blunderbuss, his left hand at the barrel, and his eye on the horseman, answered curtly, Sir. There is nothing to apprehend. I belong to Tellson's Bank. You must know Tellson's Bank in London. I am going to Paris on business. A crown to drink. I may read this. If so, be as you're quick. Sir. He opened in the light of the coach lamp on that side, and read first to himself, then aloud. Wait at Dover for Mamselle. It's not long, you see, guard. Jerry, say that my answer was recalled to life. Is this a what am I missing here? There is nothing to apprehend. I belong to Tellson's Bank. You must know Tellson's Bank in London. I'm going to Paris on business. A crown to drink. I may read this. So he's picking up a newspaper. He opened it in the light of the coach lamp on the left side and read first to himself, then aloud. Wait at Dover for Mamselle. It's not long, you see, guard. Jerry, say that my answer was recalled to life. Jerry started in his saddle. That's a blazing strange answer, too, said he, at his hoarsest. Take that message back, and they will know that I received this, as well as if I wrote. Make the best of your way. Good night. With those words, the passenger opened the coach door and got in, not at all assisted by his fellow passengers, who had expeditiously secreted their watches and purses in their boots, and were now making a general pretense of being asleep, with no more definite purpose than to escape the hazard of originating any other kind of action. The coachman lumbered on again, with heavier wreaths of mist closing around it as it began the descent. The guard soon replaced his blunderbuss in his arm chest, and having looked to the rest of his contents, and having looked at the supplementary pistols that he wore on his belt, looked to a smaller chest beneath his seat, in which there were a few smith's tools, a couple of torches, and a tinderbox. For he was furnished with that completeness that if the coach lamps had been blown and stormed out, which did occasionally happen, he had only to shut himself inside, keep the flint and steel sparks well off the straw, and get a light with tolerable safety and ease, if he were lucky, in 5 minutes. Tom, softly over the coach roof. Hello, Joe. Did you hear the message? I did, Joe. What did you make of it, Tom? Nothing at all, Joe. Too many names. That's a coincidence, too, the guard mused, for I made the same of it myself. Jerry, left alone in the mist and the darkness, dismounted meanwhile, not only to ease his spent horse, but to wipe the mud from his face, and shake the wet out of his hat brim, which might be capable of holding about a half-gallon. After standing with the bridle over his heavily splashed arms until the wheels of the mail were no longer within hearing and the night was quite still again, he turned to walk down the hill. After that, there from the Temple Bar, "Old lady, I won't trust your forelegs till I get you on the level," said this horse messenger, glancing at his mare. "Recalled to life. That's a blazing strange message. Much of that wouldn't do for you, Jerry. I say, Jerry, you be in a blazing bad way. If recalling to life was come into fashion, Jerry." Huh, okay. So, hold on. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this properly. So there's 3 passengers on this Dover mail because they're transporting some passengers as well as the mail. And there's 2 coachmen. And, yeah, not natural dialogue for sure. And all of a sudden, there's a messenger that comes looking for Jarvis Lorry. And the messenger is Jerry. And the messenger, he's very hoarse. The 2 coachmen don't like him. The other 2 passengers go in the coach. But Jarvis and him talk, and they say, "There's business for you." What was his message? "I belong to Tellison Bank. You must not tell us Bank. I'm going to Paris on business, a crown to drink. If so, be as you're quick, sir." He opened it in the light of the coach lamp. So he gives them a message, but we don't know what that message is. It's a dispatch from Tellison's Bank & Co. Hey, morning, AG. West Coaster. And then all of a sudden we're left with Jerry. And Jerry's going, I'm supposed to send a weird message. Did it say something about meeting someone? I'm trying to find where this message was. He wants a passenger. Wait for Mamselle. Yeah, he opened it in the light of the coach lamp on that side and read it first to himself and aloud. Wait at Dover for Mamselle. It's not long, you see, guard. Jerry, say that my answer was recalled to life. Weird. All right, so there's a little bit, you have to kind of focus when you're reading Dickens, at least I do. There's some strange stuff that's going on. What the heck does recalled to life mean? I don't know. But I'm sure we'll figure out. It's a strange little message that he gives them. I also love the he goes, after that, there, gallop from Temple Bar, old lady. I won't trust your forelegs till I get you on the level, said this horse messenger. Like, if I'm sitting there as a reader, I'm going, that's so funny. What a good pun. You know who would love that pun? Someone ping Ryan. Man, he would love that pun. This horse messenger, glancing at his mare. Recall to life. That's a blazing strange message. And then one thing that Dickens does that's really strange for me is he capitalizes a lot of weird words. He says that's a blazing, capital B, blazing strange message. Much of that wouldn't do for you, Jerry. I say, Jerry. You'd be in a blazing bad way if her call to life was come into fashion, Jerry. I don't understand that phrase yet. We'll see. We'll figure it out. All right, chapter 3. This is Night Shadows, or The Night Shadows. You kind of have to focus a little bit for this. Chapters are short, though. Although, yeah, this one's short. Chapter 4 is a little longer. Chapter 5 is a little longer. Chapter 5 is long. A wonderful fact to reflect upon, that every human creature is constituted to be that profound secret and mystery to every other. A solemn consideration when I enter a great city by night, that every one of those darkly clustered houses encloses its own secret, that every room in every one of them encloses its own secret, that every beating heart in the hundreds of thousands of breasts there is in some of its imaginings a secret to the heart nearest it. Something of the awfulness, even of death itself, is referable to this. No more than I can turn leaves of this dear book that I loved, and vainly hope in time to read it all. No more can I look into the depths of this unfathomable water wherein, as momentary lights glance into it, I have had glimpses of buried treasure, and other things submerged. It was appointed that the book should shut with a spring, forever and forever, when I had read aloud, when I had read but a page. It was appointed that the water should be locked in an eternal frost when the light was playing on its surface, and I stood in ignorance on the shore. My friend is dead. My neighbor is dead. My love, the darling of my soul, is dead. It is the inexorable consolidation and perpetuation of the secret that was always in the individuality, in which I carry in mind to life's end. And in the burial places of the city through which I pass, there is a sleeper more inscrutable than its busy inhabitants are, in their innermost personality to me, or than I am to them. Huh? What? As to this, his natural and not to be alienated inheritance, the messenger on horseback had exactly the same possession as the king, the first minister of state, or the richest merchant in London. So with the 3 passengers shut up in the narrow compass of the one lumbering old mail coach, they were mysteries to one another, as complete as if each had been his own coach in 6, or his own coach in 60, with the breath of a country between him and the next. The messenger rode back at an easy trot, stopping pretty often at the alehouse by the way to drink, but evincing a tendency to keep his own counsel and to keep his hat cocked over his eye. Okay. He had eyes that assorted very well with that decoration, being of a surface black, which no depth in the color or form, and much too near together, as if they were afraid of being found out in something singly if they kept too far apart. They had a sinister expression under an old cocked hat, like a 3-cornered spittoon, and over a great muffler for the chin and throat, which descended nearly to the wearer's knees. When he stopped for a drink, he moved this muffler with his left hand, only while he poured his liquor with his right. As soon as that was done, he muffled again. I'm going to guess that there's something that Dickens is really trying to communicate with someone's strong and weak hand, because I feel like he just keeps mentioning this. Like, why is he so obsessed with the people's right and left hands? No, Jerry, no, said the messenger, harping on one theme as he rode. It wouldn't do. It wouldn't do for you, Jerry. Jerry, you honest tradesman, it wouldn't suit your line of business. Recalled. Bust me if I don't think he'd been drinking. His message perplexed his mind to the degree that he was fain several times to take off his hat and scratch his head, except on the crown, which was raggedly bald. He had stiff black hair standing jaggedly all over, and growing downhill almost to his broad, blunt nose. It was so like Smith's work, so much more like at the top of the strongly spiked wall than a head of hair, that the best of players at leapfrog might have declined him, and the most dangerous man in the world would go over. And the most dangerous man in the world to go over. While he trotted back with the message he was to deliver to the night watchman in his box at the door of Tellison's bank by the Temple Bar, who was to deliver it to great authorities within, the shadows of the night took shapes to him as arose out of the message, and took such shapes to the mare as arose out of her private topics of uneasiness. They seemed to be numerous, for she yielded at every shadow on the road. What time the mail coach lumbered, jolted, rattled, and bumped upon its tedious way, with its three fellow inscrutables inside, to whom likewise the shadow of the night revealed themselves in forms their dozing eyes and wandering thoughts suggested. Tellison's bank had a run upon it in the mail, as the passenger, with an arm drawn through the leather strap, which did what lay in to keeping him from pounding against the next passenger, and driving him into his corner, whenever the coach got a special jolt, nodded in his place, with half-shut eyes. The little coach windows and the coach lamp dimly gleamed through them, and the bulky bundle of opposite passengers became the bank, and did a great stroke of business. The rattle of the harness was a chink of money, and the more drafts were honored in 5 minutes than even Tellison's, with all its foreign and home connections. Ever paid in thrice the time. Then the strong rooms underground at Tellison's, with such of their valuable stores and secrets as were known to the passengers, and it was not a little that he knew about him, opened before him, and he went in among them with great keys and a feebly burning candle, and found them safe and strong and sound and still, just as he had last seen them. Dickens likes to work in fours. But though the bank was almost always with him, and though the coach, in a confused way like the presence of pain under an opiate, was always with him, there was another current of impression that never ceased to run, all through the night. He was on his way to dig someone out of a grave. Now, which of the multitude of faces that showed themselves before him was the true face of the buried person? The shadows of the night did not indicate, but they were all the faces of a man of 45 by years, and they differed principally in the passions they expressed, and the ghastliness of their worn and wasted state. Pride, contempt, defiance, stubbornness, submission, lamentation succeeded one another. So did varieties of sunken cheek, cadaverous color, emaciated hands and fingers. But the face was the main one face, and every head was prematurely white. 100 times the dozing passenger inquired of the spectre, "Buried how long?" The answer was always the same. "Almost 18 years." "You had abandoned all hope of being dug out?" "Long ago." "You know that you were recalled to life?" "They tell me so." "I hope you care to live." "I can't say." "Shall I show her to you? Will you come and see her?" The answers to this question were various and contradictory. Sometimes the broken reply was, "Wait, it would kill me if I saw her too soon." Sometimes it was given in tender rains of tears, and then it was, "Take me to her." Sometimes it was staring and bewildered, and then it was, "I don't know her, I don't understand." What the heck is going on? so lost. Let's just finish this chapter and then we can discuss this chapter. After such imaginary discourse, the passenger in his fancy would dig. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, gotta fix something real quick. Boom. Okay. After such imaginary discourse, the passenger in his fancy would dig and dig and dig, now with a spade, now with a great key, now with his hands, to dig this wretched creature out. Got out at last, with earth hanging about his face and hair. He would suddenly fall away to dust. The passenger would then start to himself and lower the window to get the reality of the mist and rain on his cheek. Yet even when his eyes were open, on the mist and the rain, on the moving patch of light from the lamps and the hedge at the roadside, retreating by jerks, the night shadows outside the coach would fall into the train of the night shadows within. The real banking house by the Temple Bar, the real business of that past day, the real strong rooms, the real express sent after him, and the real message returned, would all be there. Out of the midst of them, the ghostly face would rise, and he would accost it again. Buried how long? Almost 18 years. I hope you care to live. I can't say. Dig, 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 and until an impatient movement from one of the two of the passengers would admonish him to pull up the window, draw his arm securely through his leather strap, and speculate upon the two slumbering forms until his mind lost its hold of them, and they again slid away into the bank and grave. Buried how long? Almost 18 years. You had abandoned all hope of being dug out? Long ago. His words were still in his hearing as just spoken, distinctly in his hearing as ever spoken words had been in his life. When the weary passenger started to the consciousness of daylight and found that the shadows of night were gone, he lowered the window and looked out at the rising sun. There was a ridge of plowed land, with a plow upon it, that where had been left the last night when the horses were unyoked. Beyond, a quiet coppice wood, in which many leaves of burning red and gold yellow, still remained upon the trees, though the earth was cold and wet. The sky was clear, and the sun rose bright, placid, and beautiful. 18 years, said the passenger, looking at the sun. Gracious creator of day, to be buried alive for 18 years. What the heck is going on? Jarvis is dreaming about the bank and about digging someone out of a grave, recalling them to life. Yeah, but who? And why? What the heck? This chapter lost me a little bit. So Jarvis just has a weird spectral dream. Or no, Jerry has a weird spectral dream. Wait, Jarvis has a weird... Lori Jarvis. No, Jarvis Lori. That's got to be figurative. Buried to life figuratively for 18 years? If you were buried alive for a week, you'd be dead. Weird metaphor maybe for depression. Strange beginning. It's like a mysterious beginning. I don't know what's going on. Okay, it feels like the little seance that we had at the beginning of Wuthering Heights. It's probably going to be a happier novel than that. But it kind of feels like that. Some of the characters are kind of funny, though. I don't mind this. But that was a weird chapter. I don't really understand what was going on in that chapter. All right, this is chapter 4. Chapter 4 is long. Chapter 5 is about the same. Chapter 6 is about the same. So 3 more chapters, all about the same. All about 10 pages. All right. The Undertaker. Let me take a sip of water, and then we'll go on to chapter 4. And it's very strange. That was a strange chapter. Don't really understand what's going on. When the mail got successfully to Dover, in the course of the forenoon, the head drawer at the Royal George Hotel opened the coach door as his custom was. He did it with some flourish of ceremony, for a mail journey from London in winter was an achievement to congratulate an adventurous traveler upon. By that time, there was only one adventurous traveler left to be congratulated, for the other 2 had been set down at their respective roadside destinations. The mildewy inside of the coach, with its damp and dirty straw, its disagreeable smell, and its obscurity, was rather like a larger dog kennel. Mr. Lorry, the passenger, shaking himself out of it in chains of straw, a tangle of shaggy wrapper, flapping hat, and muddy legs, was rather like a larger sort of dog. There will be a packet to Calais tomorrow. Drawer. I'm guessing a packet is a ship. Packet ships sailing between Dover and Calais, or then the usual means of crossing the channel. Yes, sir. If the weather holds and the wind sets tolerable fare, the tide will serve pretty nicely. At about 2 in the afternoon, sir. Bed, sir? I shall not go to bed tonight, till night, but I want a bedroom and a barber. And then breakfast, sir? Yes, sir. That way, sir, if you please. Show Concord. Gentleman's valise. And hot water to Concord. Pull off gentlemen's boots in Concord. You will find a fine sea coal fire, sir. Fetch barber to Concord. Stir about there now for Concord. The heck? The Concord bedchamber being always assigned to a passenger by the mail, and passengers by the mail being always heavily wrapped up from head to foot, the room had the odd interest for the establishment of the Royal George, that although but one kind of man was seen to go into it, all kinds and varieties of men came out of it. Consequently, another drawer and 2 porters and several maids and the landlady were all loitering by accident at various points in the road between the Concord and the coffee room, when a gentleman of 60, formally dressed in a brown suit of clothes, pretty well worn, but very well kept, with large square cuffs and a large flap to the pockets, passed along on his way to breakfast. The coffee room had no other occupant that forenoon than the gentleman in brown. His breakfast table was drawn before the fire, and as he sat with its light shining on him, waiting for the meal, he sat so still that he might have been sitting for his portrait. Very orderly and methodical he looked, with a hand on each knee, and a loud watch ticking a sonorous sermon under his flapped waistcoat, as though it pitted its gravity and longevity against the levity and evanescence of the brisk fire. He had a good leg, and was a little vain of it, for his brown stockings fitted sleek and close, and were of a fine texture. His shoes and buckles, too, though plain, were trimmed. He wore an odd, little, sleek, crisp flaxen wig, set very close to his head, which wig it is to be presumed was made of hair, but which looked far more as though it were spun from filaments of silk or glass. His linen, though not of fineness in accord with his stockings, was as white as the tops of the waves that broke upon the neighbor beach, or the specks of the sails that glinted in the sunlight far at sea. A face habitually suppressed and quieted was still lighted up under the quaint wig by a pair of moist, bright eyes that it must have cost their owner in years gone by some pains to drill to the composed and reserved expression of Tellison's Bank. He had a healthy color in his cheeks, and his face, though lined, bore few traces of anxiety. But perhaps the confidential bachelor clerks in Tellison's Bank were principally occupied with the cares of other people, and perhaps second-hand cares, like second-hand clothes, come easily off and on. Completing his resemblance to the man who was sitting for his portrait, Mr. Lorry dropped off to sleep. The arrival of his breakfast roused him, and he said to the drawer as he moved in his chair to it, I wish accommodation prepared for a young lady who may come here at any time of day. She may ask for Mr. Jarvis Lorry, or she may only ask for a gentleman from Tellison's Bank. Please, to let me know. Yes, sir. Tellison's Bank in London, sir? Yes. Yes, sir. We have oftentimes the honour of entertaining your gentlemen in their travelling backwards and forwards betwixt London and Paris, sir. A vast deal of travelling, sir, in Tellison and Company's house. Yes, we are quite a French house, as well as an English one. Yes, sir. Not much in the habit of such travelling yourself, I think, sir. Not of late years. It is 15 years since I came last from France. Indeed, sir. That was before my time here, sir. Before our people's time here, sir. The George was in the other hand at that time, sir. The George was in the other hand at the time? What is he talking about there? The George was in other hands at that time. I believe so. But I would hold a pretty wager, sir, that a house like Tellison's and Company was flourishing. A matter of 50, not to speak of 15 years ago. You might treble that, I say 150, yet not be far from the truth. Indeed, sir. Rounding his mouth, both his eyes, as he stepped backward from the table, the waiter shifted his napkin from his right arm to his left, dropped into a comfortable attitude, and stood surveying the guests while he ate and drank, as from an observatory or watchtower, according to the immemorial usage of waiters in all ages. Again, the right arm to the left arm. Oh, somebody else. Oh, the George being the inn. Okay, gotcha. I was thinking about the king. All right, that makes sense. Weird. Dickens' obsession with rights and left hands. It continues. I wonder if this is going to be an ongoing thing in his books. When Mr. Lorry had finished his breakfast, he went out for a stroll on the beach. The little narrow cricket town of Dover hid itself away from the beach and ran its head into the chalk cliffs like a marine ostrich. The beach was a desert of heaps of sea and stones tumbling wildly about, and the sea did what it liked. And what it liked was destruction. It thundered at the town, and thundered at the cliffs, and so brought the coast down madly. The air among the houses was of so strong a piscatory flavor that one might have supposed sick fish went up to be dipped in it, as sick people went down to be dipped in the sea. A little fishing was done in the port, and the quantity of strolling about by the night and by looking seaward, particularly at those times when the tide made, was near flood. And the tide made. There's a footnote. When the tide flows toward land, creating opportunities for local smuggling gangs. Oh. Small tradesmen who did no business whatever sometimes unaccountably realized large fortunes, and it was remarkable that nobody in the neighborhood could endure a lamplighter. As the day declined into afternoon and the air, which had been at intervals clear enough to allow the French coast to be seen, became again charged with mist and vapor, Mr. Lorry's thoughts seemed to be clouded too. When it was dark, and he sat before the coffee room fire awaiting his dinner as he awaited his breakfast, his mind was busily digging into the live red coals. A bottle of good claret after dinner does a digger in the red coals no harm, otherwise than it has a tendency to throw him out of work. Mr. Lorry had been idle a long time, and had just poured out his last glassful of wine with as completeness and appearance of satisfaction as is ever to be found in an elderly gentleman of a fresh complexion who has got to the trouble of a bottle, when a rattling of wheels came up to the narrow street and rumbled into the inn-yard. He set down his glass untouched. "This is Mamselle," he said. In a very few minutes the waiter came in to announce that Miss Manette had arrived from London, and would be happy to see the gentleman from Tellson's. Miss Manette. So soon? Miss Manette had taken some refreshment on the road, and required none then, and was extremely anxious to see the gentleman from Tellson's immediately, if it suited his pleasure and convenience. The gentleman from Tellson's had nothing left for it but to empty the glass with an air of stolid desperation, settle his odd little flaxen wig at the ears, and follow the waiter to Miss Manette's apartment. It was a large, dark room, furnished in a funereal manner, with black horsehair, and loaded with heavy dark tables. These had been oiled until the two tall candles on the table in the middle of the room were gloomily reflected on every leaf, as if they were buried in deep graves of black mahogany, and no light to speak of could be expected from them until they were dug out. The obscurity was so difficult to penetrate that Mr. Lorry, picking his way over the well-worn Turkey carpet, supposed Miss Manette to be, for the moment, in some adjacent room, until, having gotten past the two tall candles, he saw standing to receive him by the table between them and the fire, a young lady of not more than 17, in a riding cloak, and still holding her straw traveling hat by its ribbon in her hand. And his eyes rested on a short, slight, pretty figure, a quantity of golden hair, a pair of blue eyes that met his own with an inquiring look, and a forehead with a singular capacity, remembering how young and smooth it was, of lifting and knitting itself into an expression that was not quite one of perplexity or wonder or alarm, or merely of a bright fixed attention, though it included all the four expressions. As his eyes rested on all these things, a sudden vivid likeness passed before them, of a child whom he had held in his arms on the passage across that very channel. One cold time, when the hail drifted heavily and the sea ran high, the likeness passed away like a breath along the surface of the gaunt pier glass behind her, on the frame of which a hospital procession of Negro cupids, several headless and all cripples, were offering black baskets of Dead Sea fruit to black divinities of the feminine gender, and he made his formal bow to Miss Manette. Huh? What was that? So she's 17. How old is he again? 25? Did it say that he is 25 years old? Well, wait. His eyes rested on these things. A sudden vivid likeness passed before him, of a child whom he had held in his arms on the passage across that very channel, one cold time, when the hail drifted heavily and the sea ran high. Is that the same person? Oh, he's 60? Wait. No, No, I thought it said that the guy that was the other guy that was in the room was 60. How old is Mr. Laurie? Is Mr. Laurie 60 or is he? Who was 25? Someone was 25. It makes sense that if he was 60, then this is his daughter? Or someone that he rescued from France or something like that? An adopted daughter? Anybody got answers for that one? It said the guy, who did it say was 60? Because it definitely did say 60 somewhere. I'm trying to find it. And maybe he is 60 because it says it's 15 years since I came last from France. Unless he was really young when he came. Laurie's an older man. Okay. The beginning of the chapter when he came out of the room. Okay. So he actually is 60. So let me try to get this straight. It actually says that he's 60 here. So Mr. Laurie is an old man. I was picturing him as a younger guy. But he's not. Mr. Jarvis is an older guy. Had brought her over 15 years ago. She would have been 2. And then the seance dream that he had. "18 years to be buried alive and recalled to life." Weird. Okay, so he is 60. And this is, I guess, the girl that he rescued from France for something that we don't really know yet. At least I don't know. Maybe it said that and I'd missed it. Okay, hold on, where are we? Buried in deep graves of black mahogany and no light could speak, expect from it. They were dug out. "Pray take a seat, sir," in a very clear and pleasant young voice, a little foreign in its accent, but a very little indeed. Okay, so Miss Minette is definitely French. I mean, it's a French name, and she has a little bit to her accent still, but that's about it. "I kiss your hand, miss," said Mr. Laurie, with the manners of an earlier date, as he made his formal bow again and took his seat. "I received a letter from the bank, sir, yesterday, informing me that some intelligence or discovery. The word is not material, miss. Either word will do. Respecting the small property of my poor father, whom I never saw, so long dead." So is her dad, okay, interesting. So her dad is coming back into the story. So he probably rescued her from like this terrible situation in France. Maybe like, I don't know what, some like terrible, the slums or whatever. And they thought he was dead, but he wasn't. Maybe he was going to a debtor's prison or something like that. Okay. Mr. Laurie moved in his chair. whom I never saw, so long dead. No, it's respecting the small property of her father. So her father still is dead, but did he save an orphan? Mr. Lorry moved in his chair and cast a troubled look toward the hospital procession of Negro cupids, as if they had any help for anybody in their absurd baskets. Rendered it necessary that I should go to Paris, there to communicate with a gentleman of the bank, so good as to be dispatched to Paris for the purpose. Myself? As I was prepared to hear, sir. She curtsied to him. Young ladies made curtsies in those days, which, with a pretty desire to convey to him that she felt how much older and wiser he was than she. He made another bow. I replied to the bank, sir, that it was considered necessary by those who know, and who are so kind as to advise me, that I should go to France, and that I am an orphan, and have no friends who can go with me. I should esteem it highly if I might be permitted to place myself during the journey under the worthy gentleman's protection. The gentleman had left London, but I think the messenger was sent after him to beg the favor of his waiting for me there. I was happy, said Mr. Lorry, to be entrusted with the charge. I shall be more happy to execute it. Sir, I thank you indeed. I thank you very gratefully. It was told me by the bank that the gentleman would explain to me the details of the business, and that I must prepare myself to find them of a surprising nature. I have done my best to prepare myself, and I naturally have a strong and eager interest to know what they are. Naturally, said Mr. Lorry. Yes, after a pause, he added again, settling the crisp flaxen wig at the ears, it is very difficult to begin. He did not begin, but in his indecision met her glance. The young forehead lifted into that singular expression, but it was pretty and characteristic, besides being singular, and she raised her hand as if with an involuntary action she caught at, or stayed some passing shadow. Are you quite a stranger to me, sir? So they don't, this is, hold on. So he rescued her, but they don't know each other? So there's no mention of the rescue, but he is recalling. Oh, yeah, I'm confused here. She was too young to remember, but didn't. So on. He's sailing over the. He's sailing over the whatchamacallit with a child in his hands. She's too young to remember that. But how did he not like raise her? Did he drop her off at an orphanage or something, or drop her off with someone else? And then just leave, and like this is the first time that he sees her again? This is a lot of work. Which I like a book that's a lot of work, but I have to keep reading? Okay. All right, let's keep reading then. Also, people are chatting on Twitch. Shirlene, what's up? Between the eyebrows. Wait, are you quite a stranger to me, sir? Am I not? Mr. Lorry opened his hands and extended them outward with an augmentative smile. Between the eyebrows and just over the little feminine nose, the line of which was delicate and fine as it was possible to be. The expression deepened itself as she took her seat thoughtfully in the chair by which she had hitherto remained standing. He watched her as she mused, and the moment she raised her eyes again, went on. In your adopted country, I presume, I cannot do better than address you as a young English lady, Miss Manette. If you please, sir. Miss Manette, I am a man of business. I have a business charge to acquit myself of. in your reception of it. Don't heed me any more than if I was a speaking machine, truly. I am not much else. I will, with your leave, relate to you, miss, the story of one of our customers. This story? He seemed willfully to mistake the word she had repeated, when he added in a hurry, yes, customers. In the banking business, we usually call our connections our customers. He was a French gentleman, a scientific gentleman, a man of great acquirements, a doctor. Not of Beauvais, not of Beauvais? Why, yes, of Beauvais. Like Monsieur Manette, your father, the gentleman of Beauvais. Like Monsieur Manette, your father, the gentleman was of repute in Paris. I had the honor of knowing him there. Our relations were business relations, but confidential. I was, at that time, in our French house, and had been, 20 years. At that time, I may ask. At what time, sir? I speak, miss, of 20 years ago. He married an English lady, and I was one of the trustees. His affairs, like the affairs of many other French gentlemen and French families, were entirely in Tellison's hands. In similar way, I am, or I have been, trustee of one kind or other for scores of our customers. These are mere business relations, miss. There is no friendship in them, no particular interest, nothing like sentiment. I have passed from one to another in the course of my business life, just as I pass from one of our customers to another in the course of my business day. In short, I have no feelings. I am a mere machine. To go on, but this is my father's story, sir, and I begin to think, the curiously roughened forehead was very intent upon him, that when I left an orphan through my mother's surviving my father only 2 years, it was you who brought me to England. I am almost sure it was you. Ah, okay, interesting. So she's putting things together. Mr. Lorry took the hesitating little hand that confidingly advanced to take his, and he put it with some ceremony to his lips. Then he conducted the young lady straight away to her chair again, and holding the chair back with his left hand and using his right, again, left and right hands, by turns to rub his chin, pulled his wig at the ears, or point what he said, stood looking down into her face while she sat looking into his. Miss Manette, it was I. And you will see how truly I spoke of myself just now in saying I had no feelings, and that all relations I hold with my fellow creatures are mere business relations. When you reflect that I have never seen you since, know that you have been the ward of Tellison's house since, and I have been busy with other business of Tellison's house since. Feelings. I have no time for them. No chance of them. I pass my whole life, miss, in turning an immense pecuniary mangle. He's a machine. After this odd description of his daily routine of employment, Mr. Lorry flattened his flaxen wig upon his head with both hands, which was most unnecessary, for nothing could be flatter than its shining surface was before, and resumed his former attitude. So far, miss, as you have remarked, this is the story of your regretted father. Now comes the difference. If your father had not died when he did, don't be frightened how you start. She did indeed start, and she caught his wrist with both her hands. Pray, say Mr. Lorry in a soothing voice, bringing his left hand from the back of his chair to lay it on the supplicatory fingers that clasped him in so violent a tremble. Pray control your agitation. A matter of business. As I was saying, he's like, stop crying. We're talking about business here. We believe his self-description. I feel like, yeah, maybe not. Her look so discomposed him that he stopped, wandered, and began anew. As I was saying, if Monsieur Manette had not died, if he had suddenly and silently disappeared, if he had been spirited away, if it had not been difficult to guess to what dreadful place, though no art could trace him, if he had an enemy in some compatriot who could exercise a privilege that in my own time I have known the boldest people afraid to speak of in a whisper, across the water there, for instance, the privilege of filing up bank forms for the consignment of any one to the oblivion of a prison for any length of time. If his wife had implored the king and the queen, the court, the clergy for any tidings of him, and all quite in vain, and the history of your father would have been the history of this unfortunate gentleman, the doctor of Beauvais. I entreat you to tell me more, sir. I will, I am going to. You can bear it? I can bear anything but the uncertainty you leave me in this moment. You speak collectedly, and you are collected. That's good. Though this manner was less satisfied than his words. As a matter of business, regarded as a matter of business that must be done. Now if this doctor's wife, though a lady of great courage and spirit, had suffered so intently from this cause before her little child was born. The little child was a daughter, sir. A daughter. A matter of business. Don't be distressed. Mr. Lorry's so weird. Miss, if the poor lady had suffered so intensely before her little child was born, that she came to the determination of sparing the poor child the inheritance of any part of the agony she had known the pains of, by rearing her in the belief that her father was dead. Oh, no, don't kneel. In heaven's name, why should you kneel to me? For the truth, oh dear, good compassionate sir, for the truth. A matter of business. You confuse me. And how can I transact business if I am confused? Let us be clear-headed. If you could kindly mention now, for instance, what 9 times 10 pence are, or how many shillings in 20 guineas, it would be so encouraging. I should be so much more at ease about your state of mind. Without directly answering to this appeal, she sat so still when he had very gently raised her, and the hands that he had not ceased to clasp his wrists were so much more steady than they had been, that she communicated some reassurances to Mr. Jarvis Lorry. That's right. Courage, business. You have business before you, useful business. Miss Manette, your mother took this course with you, and when she died, I believe, broken-hearted, having never slackened her unavailing search for your father, she left you at 2 years old to grow to be blooming, beautiful, and happy, without the dark clouds upon you of living in uncertainty, whether your father soon wore his heart out in his prison, or wasted there through many lingering years. As he said the words, he looked down with an admiring pity on the flowing golden hair, as if he pictured to himself that it might have been already tinged with gray. You know that your parents had no great possession, and that what they had was secured to your mother and to you. There has been no new discovery of money or of any other property. But he felt his wrists held closer, and he stopped. The expression in his forehead, which had so particularly attracted his notice, and which was now movable, had deepened into one of pain and horror. But he has been found. He is alive. Greatly changed. It is too probable, almost a wreck. It is possible, though we will hope the best. Still alive. Your father has been taken to the house of an old servant in Paris, and we are going there. I to identify him if I can to you, you to restore him to life, love, duty, rest, comfort. Oh, recalled to life. All right. We're piecing things together. So this is the dude that was buried alive, quote unquote. All right, so I'm piecing things together a bit more. I'm like getting the plot of this now. A shiver ran through her frame, and from it through his. She said in a low, distinct, awe-stricken voice, as if she were saying it in a dream, I am going to see his ghost. It will be his ghost, not him. Mr. Lorry quietly chafed the hands that held his arm. There. See now. The best and the worst are known to you. You are well on your way to the poor wronged gentleman, and with a fair sea voyage and a fair land journey, you will be soon at his dear side. You are on your way to the poor wronged gentleman. So was he in prison? Was he wrongly convicted of a crime? Do we know? Do we know why he had disappeared? Did I miss that? Because it says he wore his heart in prison or wasted there through many lingering years. Was he actually in prison? So we don't really know. Okay. Interesting. I feel like a wrongful conviction. Wrongfully imprisoned. We don't know why yet. Just seems like he disappeared. Okay. She repeated in the same tone, sunk to a whisper. I have been free. I have been happy. Yet his ghost has never haunted me. Interesting. Only one thing more, said Mr. Lorry, laying stress upon it as a wholesome means of enforcing her attention. He has been found under another name. His own. Long forgotten or long concealed. It would be worse than useless now to inquire which. Worse than useless to seek to know whether he has been for years overlooked or always designedly held prisoner. It would be worse than useless now to make any inquiries, because it would be dangerous. Better not to mention the subject anywhere or in any way, and to remove him, for a while at all events, out of France. Even I, safe as an Englishman, and even Tellson's, important as they are to French credit, avoid all naming of the matter. I carry about me not a scrap of writing openly referring to it. This is a secret service altogether. My credentials, entreaties, and memoranda are all comprehended in one line. Recalled to life. Which may mean anything. But what is the matter? She doesn't notice a word, Miss Manette. Perfectly still and silent, and not even fallen back in her chair, she sat under his hand, utterly insensible, with her eyes open and fixed upon him, and with that last expression looking as if it were carved or branded into her forehead. So close was her hold upon his arm, that he feared to detach himself, lest he should hurt her. Therefore he called out loudly for assistance without moving. A wild-looking woman, whom even in his agitation Mr. Lorry observed to be all of a red color and to have red hair and to be dressed in some extraordinary tight-fitting fashion, and to have on her head a most wonderful bonnet like a grenadier wooden measure. And good measure, too, or a great Stilton cheese, came running into the room in advance of the inn servants, and soon settled the question of his attachment from the poor young lady by laying a brawny hand upon his chest and sending him flying back against the nearest wall. I really think this must be a man, was Mr. Lorry's breathless reflection simultaneously with his coming against the wall. Why, look at you all, bawled this finger, addressing the inn servants. Why don't you go and fetch things instead of standing there staring at me? I am not so much to look at, am I? Why don't you go and fetch things, and I'll let you know. If you don't bring smelling salts, cold water, and vinegar, quick, I will. There was an immediate dispersal for these restoratives, and she softly laid the patient on a sofa and tended her with great skill and gentleness, calling her my precious, oh, little Smeagol, without frightening her to death. Look at her, with her pretty pale face and her cold hands. Do you call that being a banker? Mr. Lorry was so exceedingly disconcerted by a question so hard to answer that he could only look on at a distance with much feebler sympathy and humility, while the strong woman, having banished the inn servants under the mysterious penalty of letting them know, something not mentioned if they stayed there, staring recovered her charge by a regular series of gradations, and coaxed her to lay her drooping head upon her shoulder. I hope she will do well now, said Mr. Lorry. No thanks to you in brown if she does, my pretty darling, or my darling pretty. I hope, said Mr. Lorry, after another pause of feeble sympathy and humility, that you accompany Miss Manette to France. A likely thing, too, replied the strong woman. It was ever intended that I should go across the salt water. Do you suppose Providence would have cast my lot in an island? This being another question hard to answer, Mr. Jarvis Lorry withdrew to consider it. Who is this wild-looking woman? Is she just like a strong woman? Like, what is going on with that? An enemy rigged paperwork to get him sent to prison. That enemy's probably still around, no? governess or a maid. She's strong though. Yeah, it makes sense that he's like, you should go with her because maybe she could. Maybe she'd be able to. All right, chapter 5, the wine shop. This book is interesting so far. It is simultaneously easy to read and difficult. Like, I'm enjoying it, but it's also a little bit more work than some of the other novels that we've done so far. Maybe it's just a little bit of the start of it. I don't think it's necessarily a slow start so much as like meandering. No, not so much. I don't know. It's a weird start because it doesn't necessarily start slow, but it's like the writing itself, it's kind of disguised. We're not disguised. It's kind of like distracted almost. Like he was getting paid by the word, which everyone complains about. Chapter 5, the wine shop. A large cask of wine had been dropped and broken. In the streets, the accident had happened in getting it out of a cart. The cask had tumbled out with a run. The hoops had burst, and it lay on the stones just outside the door of the wine shop, shattered like a walnut shell. All the people within reach had suspended their business, or the idleness, to run to the spot and drink the wine. The rough, irregular stones of the street, pointing every way, and designed, one might have thought, expressly to lame all living creatures that approached them, had dammed it into little pools. These were surrounded, each by its own jostling group or crowd, according to its size. Some men kneeled down, made scoops of their 2 hands joined, and sipped, or tried to help women who bent over their shoulders to sip before the wine had all run out between their fingers. Other men and women dipped in puddles with little mugs of mutilated earthenware, or even with handkerchiefs from women's heads. They were squeezed dry into infants' mouths. Others made small mud embankments to stem the wine as it ran. Others, directed by lookers-on at the high windows, darted here and there to cut off little streams of wine that started away in new directions. Others devoted themselves to sodden and lee-dyed pieces of the cask, licking and even champing the moister, wine-rotted fragments with eager relish. There was no drainage to carry off the wine. And not only did it all get taken up, but so much mud got taken up along with it that there might have been a scavenger in the streets. If anybody acquainted with it could have believed in such a miraculous presence. A scavenger, I'm guessing like a street sweeper to some extent. Yeah, this is that's what I'm saying. You have to pay attention in this novel. I don't think I would ever be able to listen to this novel because I'd do it passively. Like, this novel requires your focus a little bit more. I'm curious if a lot of Dickens is like that. What is this footnote? Is 19. Okay, oops. Originally and literally a road sweeper. The shrill sound of laughter and mused voices of men, women, and children, resounded in their streets while this wine game lasted. There was little roughness in this sport, and much playfulness. There was a special companionship in it, an observable inclination on the part of everyone to join some other one, which led, especially among the luckier and lighter-hearted, to frolicsome embraces, drinking of healths, shaking of hands, and even joining of hands and dancing, a dozen times together. When the wine was gone, and the places where it had been most abundant were raked into gridiron patterns by fingers, these demonstrations ceased, as suddenly as they had broken out. The man who had left his saw sticking in the firewood he was cutting set it to motion again. The woman who had left on the doorstep a little pot of hot ashes, at which she had been trying to soften the pain of her own starved fingers and toes, or the throes of her child, returned to it. Men with bare arms, matted locks, and cadaverous faces, who had emerged into the winter light from cellars, moved away to descend again, into a gloom gathered on the scene that appeared more natural to it than sunshine. The wine was red wine, and had stains on the ground of the narrow streets in the suburbs of Saint Antonia, in Paris, where it was spilled. It had stained many hands, too, and many faces, and many naked feet. This feels like a metaphor for the blood that's going to kind of start flowing. And many wooden shoes. The hands of the man who saw the wooden horse left red marks on the billets. On the forehead of the woman who nursed her baby was stained with the stain of old rags she wound about her head again. Those who had been greedy with the staves of the cask had acquired a tigerish smear about their mouths. And one tall joker so besmirched, his head more out of a long squalid bag of nightcap than in it, scrawled upon a wall with his finger dipped into the muddy wine lees, blood. The time was to come when that wine too would be spilled on the street stones, and when the stain of it would be read upon many there. There you go. There you go. Yeah, you guys are listening to me read. Good luck with that. I can't even read well, and you guys are trying to listen to it passively. Good luck, good luck. And now that the clouds settled on Saint Antoine, which a momentary gleam had driven from his sacred countenance, the darkness of it was heavy. Cold dirt, sickness, ignorance, and want were the lords in waiting on the saintly presence. Nobles of great power, all of them, but most especially the last, samples of a people that had undergone a terrible grinding and regrinding in the mill, and certainly not in the fabulous mill. The fabulous mill. Miller, whose ground old men and women back into younger versions of themselves, was a figure from folk tale, and Dickens may be remembering some favorite chapbook from his boyhood. That's kind of cool. Where am I? Which ground old people young, shivered at every window corner, passed in and out of every doorway, looked from every window, fluttered in every vestige of a garment that the wind shook. The mill which had worked them down was the mill that grinds young people old. The children had ancient faces and grave voices, and upon them and upon the grown faces, and plowed into every furrow of age, and coming up afresh, was the sign, hunger. It was prevalent everywhere. Hunger was pushed out of the tall houses, in the wretched clothing that hung upon the poles and lines. Hunger was passed into them with straw and rag and wood and paper. Hunger was repeated in every fragment of the small modicum of firewood that the man sawed off. Hunger was stared down from the smokeless chimneys, and started up from the filthy streets that had no offal. Among its refuse of anything to eat, hunger was the inscription on the baker's shelves, written in every small loaf of the scanty stock of bad bread, at the sausage shop, and every dead dog preparation that was offered for sale. Hunger rattled its dry bones among the roasted chestnuts and the turned cylinder. Hunger was shred into atomies in every farthing porringer of husky chips of potato, fried with some reluctant drops of oil. Its abiding place was in all things fitted to it, a narrow winding street full of offense and stench, with other narrow winding streets diverging, all people by rags and nightcaps, and all smelling of rags and nightcaps, and all visible things with a brooding look upon them that looked ill. In the hunted air of the people there was yet some wild beast, thought the possibility of turning at bay. Depressed and slinking though they were, eyes of fire were not wanting among them, nor compressed lips. White with what they suppressed, nor foreheads knitted into the likeness of the gallows rope, they mused about the enduring or inflicting. The trade signs, and they were all almost as many as the shops, were all grim illustrations of want. The butcher and the porkman painted up, the only leanest scrags of meat. The baker the coarsest of meager loaves. The people rudely pictured as drinking in the wine shops croaked over their scanty measures of thin wine and beer, and were glowering confidential together. Nothing was represented in a flourishing condition save tools and weapons, but the cutler's knives and the axles were sharp and bright, and the smith's hammers were heavy, and the gunmaker's stock was murderous. The crippling stones of the pavement, with their many little reservoirs of mud and water, had no footways, but broke off abruptly at the doors. The kennel, to make amends, ran down to the middle of the street, when it ran at all, which was only after heavy rains, and then it ran, by many eccentric fits, into the houses. Across the streets, at wide intervals, one clumsy lamp was slung by rope and pulley. At night, when the lamplighter had let these down and lighted and hoisted them up again, a feeble grove of dim wicks swung in sickly manner overhead, as if they were at sea. Indeed, they were at sea, and the ship and the crew were in peril of tempest. For the time was to come when the gaunt scarecrows of that region should have watched the lamplighter, in their idleness and hunger, so long as to conceive the idea of improving on his method, and hauling up men by the ropes and pulleys to flare upon the darkness of their condition. But the time was not yet come, and every wind that blew over France shook the rags of scarecrows in vain, for the birds, fine of song and feather, took no warning. The wine shop was a corner shop, better than most others in its appearance and degree, and the master of the wine shop had stood outside it, in a yellow waistcoat and green breeches, looking on the struggle for the lost wine. "It's not my affair," she said, with a final shrug of the shoulders. "The people from the market did it. Let them bring another." There, his eyes happening to catch the tall joker writing up his joke, he called to him across the way. "Say then, my Gaspard, what do you do there?" The fellow pointed his joke with immense significance, as is often the way with his tribe. It missed its mark and completely failed, as is often the way with his tribe too. "What now? Are you subject for the mad hospital?" said the wine shop keeper, crossing the road, and obliterating the jest with a handful of mud picked up for the purpose and smeared over it. "Why do you write in the public streets? Thou tell me, is there no other place to write such words in?" In his expostulation, he dropped his cleaner hand, perhaps accidentally, perhaps not, upon the joker's heart. The joker rapped it with his own, took a nimble spring upward, and came down in a fantastic dancing attitude, with one of his stained shoes jerked off his foot into his hand and held out. A joker of an extremely, not to say wolfishly practical character, he looked under those circumstances. Put it on," said the other. "Call wine, and finish there." With that advice, he wiped his soiled hand upon the joker's dress, such as it was, quite deliberately, as having dirtied the hand on his account, and then he recrossed the road and entered the wine shop. This wine shop keeper was a bull-necked, martial-looking man of 30, and he should have been of hot temper, for although it was a bitter day, he wore no coat, but carried one slung over his shoulder. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, too, and his brown arms were bare to the elbows. Neither did he wear anything more on his head than his own crisply curling short dark hair. He was a dark man altogether, with good eyes and a good bold breath between them. Good-humored looking, on the whole, but implacable looking, too. Evidently a man of strong resolution and set purpose, a man not desirable to be met, rushing down a narrow pass with a gulf on either side, for nothing could turn the man. Madame Defarge, his wife, sat in the shop behind the counters as he came in. Madame Defarge was a stout woman of about his own age, with a watchful eye that seldom seemed to look at anything, a large hand heavily ringed, a steady face, strong features, and great composure of manner. There was a character about Madame Defarge from which one might have predicated that she did not often make mistakes against herself in any of the reckonings of which she presided. Madame Defarge, being sensitive to cold, was wrapped in fur, and had a quantity of bright shawl twined about her head, though not the concealment of her large earrings. Her knitting was before her. Oh, she's a knitter. So is she gonna be one of the people that's like knitting during the beheadings? Interesting. Is this gonna be our main villain? Is Madame Defarge gonna be our villain in this story? All right. Here we go. Her knitting was before her, but she had laid it down to pick her teeth with a toothpick. Oh, she's definitely the villain. If she's picking her teeth with a toothpick, that is villain behavior. Thus engaged with her right elbow supported by her left hand, Madame Defarge said nothing when her lord came in, but coughed just one grain of cough. This, in combination with the lifting of her darkly defined eyebrows over her toothpick by the breath of a line, suggested to her husband that he would do well to look round the shop among the customers for any new customers who had dropped in while he stepped over the way. The wine shopkeeper, accordingly, rolled his eyes about until they rested upon an elderly gentleman and a young lady, who were seated in a corner. Other company were there, two playing cards, two playing dominoes, three standing by a counter, lengthening out a short supply of wine. As he passed behind the counter, he took notice that the elderly gentleman said in a look to the young lady, "This is our man." "What the devil do you do in that galley there?" said Monsieur Defarge to himself. "I don't know you." Hold on, I gotta sneeze 1 second. Woo. Excuse me. And the galley is over there. Hold on. And the galley there, 24, over there. Such word-for-word translations of actual untranslatable French colloquialisms stud the dialogue that Dickens writes for the French characters in the novel. Interesting. "What the devil do you do in that gallery there?" said Monsieur Defarge to himself. "I don't know you." So he's trying to translate, but these idiomatic phrases just don't work. Knitters do get a bad rap in the French Revolution. Anybody who knits during the French Revolution now, I'm watching them. All right, let's keep reading. But he feigned not to notice the two strangers and fell into discourse with the triumvirate of customers who were drinking at the counter. "How goes it, Jacques?" said one of the three to Monsieur Defarge. "Is all the spilt wine swallowed?" "Every drop, Jacques," answered Monsieur Defarge. When this interchange of Christian name was effected, Madame Defarge, picking her teeth with her toothpick, coughed another grain of cough, and raised her eyebrows by the breath of another line. "It is not often," said the second of three, addressing Monsieur Defarge, "that many of these miserable beasts know the taste of wine, or of anything but black bread and death. Is it not so, Jacques?" "It is so, Jacques," Monsieur Defarge returned. "So are all their names Jacques, or is this just like they're all just calling themselves code names? Or does this mean something like endearing in France? Does Jacques mean like buddy?" At this second interchange of the Christian name, Madame Defarge, still using her toothpick with profound composure, coughed another grain of cough and raised her eyebrows by the breath of another line. The last of the three now said his say, and he put down his empty drinking vessel and smacked his lips. "Ah, so much the worst. A bitter taste it is that such poor cattle always have in their mouths, and hard lives they live, Jacques. Am I right, Jacques?" "You are right, Jacques," was the response of Monsieur Defarge. This third interchange of the Christian name was completed at the moment when Madame Defarge put her toothpick by, kept her eyebrows up, and slightly rustled in her seat. Is this all code stuff? Hold then, shrew, muttered her husband. Gentlemen, my wife. The three customers pulled off their hats to Madame Defarge. With three flourishes, she acknowledged their homage by bending her head and giving them a quick look. Then she glanced in casual manner round the wine shop, took up her knitting with great apparent calmness and repose of spirit, and became absorbed in it. Gentlemen, said her husband, who had kept his bright eyes observantly upon her, good day. The chamber furnished bachelor fashion that you wish to see, and were inquiring for when I stepped in, is on the 5th floor. The doorway of the staircase gives on the little courtyard close to the left here, pointing with his hand, near to the window of my establishment. But now that I remember, one of you has already been there, and can show the way. Gentlemen, adieu. They paid for the wine and left the place. The eyes of Monsieur Defarge were studying his wife at her knitting when the elderly gentleman advanced from his corner, and begging the favor of a word. Willingly, sir, said Monsieur Defarge, and quietly stepped with him to the door. Their conference was very short, but very decided. Almost at the first word, Monsieur Defarge started and became deeply attentive. It did not last a minute, when he nodded and went out. The gentleman then beckoned to the young lady, and they too went out. Madame Defarge knitted with nimble fingers and steady eyebrows, and saw nothing. Mr. Jarvis Lorry and Miss Manette, emerging from the wine shop thus, I didn't even know they were there. Am I missing stuff? Joined Monsieur Defarge in the doorway to which he had directed his other company just before. It opened from a stinking little black courtyard, and was the general public entrance to a great pile of houses, inhabited by a great number of people, and the gloomy tile-paved entry to the gloomy tile-paved staircase. Monsieur Defarge bent down on one knee to the child of his old master, and put her hand to his lips. It was a gentle action, but not all gently done. A very remarkable transformation had come over him in a few seconds. He had no good humor in his face, nor any openness of aspect left, but it had become a secret, angry, dangerous man. It is very high. It is a little difficult. Better to begin slowly. Thus Monsieur Defarge, in a stern voice, to Mr. Lorry as they began ascending the stairs. Is he alone? The latter whispered. Alone? God help him. Who should be with him? Said the others in the same voice. Is he always alone then? Yes. Of his own desire? Of his own necessity. As he was when I first saw him when I first saw him after they found me, and demanded to know if I would take him, and at my peril be discreet, as he was then, so he is now. He is greatly changed. Changed. The keeper of the wine shop stopped to strike the wall with his hands and mutter a tremendous curse. No direct answer could have been half so forcible. Mr. Lorry's spirits grew heavier and heavier, and he and his two companions ascended higher and higher. Such a staircase with its accessories in the older and more crowded parts of Paris would be bad enough now, but at that time it was vile indeed to unaccustomed and unhardened senses. Every little habituation within the great foul nest of one high building, that is to say, the room within every door that opened on the general staircase, left its own heap of refuse on its own landing, besides flinging other refuse from its own windows. The uncontrollable and hopeless mass of decomposition so engendered would have polluted the air, even if poverty and deprivation had not loaded it with their intangible impurities. The two bad sources combined made it almost insupportable, though such an atmosphere, by a steep dark shaft of dirt and poison, the way lay. Yielding to his own disturbance of mind, and to his young companion's agitation, which became greater every instant, Mr. Jarvis Lorry twice stopped to rest. Each of these stoppages was made at a doleful grating, by which any languishing good airs were left uncorrupted, seemed to escape, and all spoilt and sickly vapors seemed to crawl in, though the rusted bars tastes, rather than glimpses, were caught of the jumbled neighborhood, and nothing within range, nearer or lower than the summits of the two great towers of Notre Dame, had any promise on it of healthy life or wholesome aspirations. At last, the top of the staircase was gained, and they stopped for a third time. There was yet an upper staircase of a steeper inclination and of contracted dimensions to be ascended, before the garret story was reached. The keeper of the wine shop, always going a little in advance, and always going a little on the side which Mr. Lorry took, as though he dreaded to be asked questions by the young lady, turned himself about here, and carefully, feeling in his pockets of the coat he carried over his shoulders, took out a key. "The door is locked, then, my friend?" said Mr. Lorry, surprised. "Ah, yes," was the reply of Monsieur Defarge. "You think it necessary to keep the unfortunate gentleman so retired?" "I think it necessary to turn the key." Monsieur Defarge whispered it closer in his ear, and frowned heavily. "Why?" "Why? Because he has lived so long locked up that he would not be frightened, rave, tear himself to pieces, die, come to know not what harm if his door was left open." "Is it possible?" exclaimed Mr. Lorry. "Is it possible?" repeated Defarge bitterly. "Yes, and a beautiful world we live in, when it is possible, when many other things such as are possible. And not only possible, but done. Done, you see, under the sky there, every day. Long live the devil. Let us go on." This dialogue had been held in so very low a whisper that not a word of it had reached the young lady's ears. But by the time she trembled under such strong emotions, and her face expressed such deep anxiety, and above all, such dread and terror, that Mr. Lorry felt it incumbent on him to speak a word or two of reassurances. "Courage, dear miss, courage, business. The worst of it will be over in a moment. It is but passing the room door, and the worst is over. Then all the good you bring to him, all the relief, all the happiness you bring to him, begin. Let our good friend here assist you on that side. That's well, friend Defarge. Come now, business. Mr. Lorry is so strange." They went up slowly and softly. The staircase was short, and they were soon at the top. There it had an abrupt turn in it. They came all at once in sight of the three men, whose heads were bent down close together at the side of a door, and who were intently looking into the room which the door belonged, through some chinks or holes in the wall. On hearing footsteps close at hand, these three turned and rose and showed themselves to be the three of one name who had been drinking in the wine shop. "I forgot them in the surprise of your visit," explained Monsieur Defarge. "Leave us, good boys. We have business here." The three glided by and went silently down. There appearing to be no one on the other door on that floor, and the keeper of the wine shop going straight to this one, were left alone, Mr. Lorry asked him in a whisper with a little anger, "Did you make a show of Monsieur Manette?" I show him in the way you have seen, to a chosen few." "Is that well?" "I think it is well." "Who are the few? How do you choose them?" "I choose them as real men of my name. Jacques is my name, to whom the sight is likely to do good. Enough. You are English. That is another thing. Stay here, if you please, a little moment." With an admonitory gesture to keep them back, he stooped and looked in through the crevice in the wall. Soon raising his head again, he struck twice or thrice upon the door, evidently with no other object than to make a noise there. With the same intention, he drew the key across it 3 or 4 times before he put it clumsily into the lock and turned it as heavily as he could. The door slowly opened inward under his hand, and he looked into the room and said something. A faint voice answered something. Little more than a single syllable could have been spoken on either side. He looked back over his shoulder and beckoned them to enter. Mr. Lorry got his arm securely around his daughter's waist and held her, for he felt she was sinking. Business, he urged, with the moisture that was not of business shining on his cheek. Come in. I'm afraid of it, she answered, shuddering. Of it? What? I meant of him, of my father. Rendered in a manner desperate by her state and by the beckoning of their conductor, he drew over his neck the arms that shook upon his shoulder, lifted her a little, and hurried her into the room. He set her down within the door and held her, clinging to him. Defarge drew out the key, closed the door, locked it on the inside, took out the key again, and held it in his hand. All this he did methodically, and with as loud and harsh an accompaniment of noise as he could make. Finally, he walked across the room with a measured tread to where the window was. He stopped there and faced round. The garret, built to be a depository for firewood and the like, was dim and dark, for the window of the dormer shape was in truth a door in the roof, with a little crane over it for the hoisting up of stores from the street, unglazed and closing up to the middle in two pieces, like any other door of French construction. To exclude the cold, one half of the door was fast closed, and the other half was open, but a very little way. Such a scanty portion of light was admitted through these means that it was difficult on first coming up to see anything. And long habit alone could have slowly formed in anyone the ability to do any work requiring nicety in such obscurity. Yet work of the kind was being done in the garret, for with his back to the door and his face toward the window, where the keeper of the wine shop stood looking at him, a white-haired man sat on a low bench, stooping forward and very busy, making shoes. Weird. He's making shoes. Okay, so this is her father just chilling making shoes. Some strange stuff going on in this book right now. Like, why is this a secret mission? I don't understand why it's a secret mission. We're gonna read one more chapter, but why is this a secret mission? Sorry, I got a text. Her dad is being hidden after being discovered, but maybe he's still a wanted man. Yeah, potentially. How many of you guys have read this novel too? Like, how many of you know what the plot of this novel is? Maybe he's a wanted man, potentially political danger, maybe? Because whoever had him in prison might not like him being released. So maybe why is he in this little like hovel? Why are the Defarges hiding him? That seems strange to me. Because they kind of seem villainous to me. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just grumpy. And then what happened with this? So help me understand this part. He goes to his companions, and they say Jacques thrice. And so then those three guys go up. What were they doing in the room? Because they go up and they're like in that room right before they unlock it. Or are they in the hallway? No, I definitely don't want the answer. I'm just going to read and find out. But help me out with some of the answers. Jacques is an extremely common name. But that definitely felt like a code. It was like Jacques. They all go up to that little door. And they just kept saying it. Maybe Dickens does do a lot of like names and dialogue, which doesn't feel great, but that was strange. Also, hello Thoro on Twitch, if you're still watching. Don't have a ton of people on Twitch, but I have one person on Twitch. Jacques was a code name. They are there for a reason. Okay, sweet. So they're there, but we just don't know the reason. But help me understand where they are. So Monsieur Defarge, he comes up and he's leading them through these hallways that are disgusting, that are gross. Are they just in the hallway or are they in the room? Excuse me. Like, where were they? They are entering. Okay, so are they going to be with them when they enter into the door? No, he sent them back, right? They were looking through into the father's room. Okay, an attic storage room. Okay, interesting. Funky. Don't know what's going on. But you definitely have to stay focused for this novel. All right, let's do one more chapter. This is going to be the last chapter in this first part, which will be great. Another 10 pages. So they're just peeking into the room. Why are they peeking into the room? What's up with this guy? Are we going to know why after this chapter? I hope so, but I kind of doubt it. All right, this is chapter 6, which is the shoemaker. Good day, said Monsieur Defarge, looking down at the white head that bent low over the shoemaking. It was raised for a moment, and a very faint voice responded to the salutation as if it were at a distance. Good day. You are still hard at work, I see. After a long silence, the head was lifted for another moment, and the voice replied, Yes, I am working. This time a pair of haggard eyes had looked at the questioner, before the face had dropped again. The faintness of the voice was pitiable and dreadful. It was not the faintness of physical weakness, though confinement and hard fare no doubt had their part in it. Its deplorable peculiarity was that the faintness of solitude and disuse. It was a faintness of solitude and disuse. It was like the last feeble echo of a sound made long, long ago. So entirely had it lost the life and resonance of the human voice, that it affected the senses like a once beautiful color faded away into the poor weak stain. So sunken and suppressive it was, that it was like a voice underground. So expressive it was of a hopeless and lost creature, that a famished traveler, wearied out by a lonely wandering in the wilderness, would have remembered home and friends in such a tone before lying down to die. Gosh. Some minutes of silent work had passed, and the haggard eyes had looked up again. Dickens is not economical in his writing. Which is fine, but it's funny. He just goes on for a paragraph to describe how this guy's voice sounded. Sometimes minutes of silent work had passed, and the haggard eyes had looked up again. Not with any interest or curiosity, but with a dull mechanical perception beforehand that the spot where the only visitor they were aware of had stood, yet was not empty. I want, said Defarge, who had not removed his gaze from the shoemaker, to let a little light in here. You can bear a little more. The shoemaker stopped his work, looked with a vacant air of listening at the floor on one side of him, then similarly at the floor on the other side of him, then upward at the speaker. What did you say? You can bear a little more light. If I must bear it, I must bear it if you let it in, laying the palest shadow of stress upon the second word. The opened half door was opened a little further, and secured at that angle for a time. A broad ray of light fell into the garret, and showed the workman with an unfinished shoe upon his lap, pausing in labor. His few common tools and various scraps of leather were at his feet and on his bench. He had a white beard, raggedly cut, but not very long, a hollow face, and exceedingly bright eyes. The hollowness and thinness of his face would have caused them to look large, under his yet dark eyebrows, and his confused white hair, though they had been really otherwise. But they were naturally large, and looked unnaturally so. His yellow rags of shirt lay open at his throat, and showed his body to be withered and worn. He, in his old canvas frock, and his loose stockings and all his poor tatters of clothes had, in a long seclusion from direct light and air, faded down to such dull uniformity of parchment yellow that it would have been hard to say which was which. He had put up a hand between his eyes and the light, and the very bones of it seemed transparent. So he sat with a steadfast, vacant gaze, pausing in his work. He never looked at the figure before him, without first looking down at his side, down at this side of him, then on that, as if he had lost the habit of associating place with sound. Then he never spoke without first wandering into the spinner, and forgetting to speak. Strange. Are you going to finish that pair of shoes today? Asked Defarge, motioning to Mr. Lorry to come forward. What did you say? Do you mean to finish that pair of shoes today? I can't say that I mean to. I suppose so, but I don't know. But the question reminded him of his work, and he bent over it again. Mr. Lorry came silently forward, leaving the daughter by the door. When he had stood for a minute or two by the side of Defarge, the shoemaker looked up. He showed no surprise at seeing another figure. By the unsteady fingers of one hand strayed to his lips as he looked at it. His lips and his nails were of the same pale lead color. And then his hand dropped to his work, and he once more bent over the shoe. The look and the action had occupied but an instant. You have a visitor, you see, said Monsieur Defarge. What did you say? Here is a visitor. The shoemaker looked up as before, but without removing a hand from his work. Come, said Defarge. Here is Monsieur, who knows a well-made shoe when he sees one. Show him what you are working at. Take it, Monsieur. Mr. Lorry took it in his hand. Tell Monsieur what kind of shoe it is, and the maker's name. There was a longer pause than usual before the shoemaker replied, I forget what it is you asked me. What did you say? I said, couldn't you describe the kind of shoe for Monsieur's information? It's a lady's shoe. It is a young lady's walking shoe. It is in the present mode. I never saw the mode. I have a pattern in my hand. He glanced at the shoe with some little passing touch of pride. And the maker's name, said Defarge. Now that he had no work to hold, he laid the knuckles of his right hand in the hollow of his left, and the knuckles of the left in the hollow of his right, and then passed a hand across his bearded chin, and so on in the regular changes without a moment's intermission. The task of recalling him from the vacancy into which he always sank when he had spoken was like recalling some very weak persons from a swoon, or endeavoring in the hopes of some disclosure to stay the spirit of a fast-dying man. Did you ask me for my name? Surely I did. 105 North Tower. Is that a hall? 105 North Tower. With a weary sound that was not a sigh nor a groan, he bent to work again, until the silence was again broken. You are not a shoemaker by trade, said Mr. Lorry, looking steadfastly at him. His haggard eyes turned to Defarge as if he would transfer the question to him, but as no help came from that quarter, they turned back on the questioner when they had sought the ground. I am not a shoemaker by trade. No, I was a shoemaker by trade. Oh, no, I was not a shoemaker by trade. I learnt it here. I taught myself. I asked leave to. He lapsed away, even for minutes, ringing those measured changes on his hand the whole time. His eyes came slowly back, at last, to the face from which they had wandered. When they rested on it, he stared and resumed in the manner of a sleeper that moment awake, reverting to his subject of last night. I asked leave to teach myself. I got it with much difficulty after a long while, and I have made shoes ever since. As he held out his hand for the shoe that had been taken from him, Mr. Lorry said, still looking steadfastly in his face, Monsieur Manette, do you remember nothing of me? The shoe dropped to the ground, and he sat looking fixedly at the questioner. Monsieur Manette, Mr. Lorry laid his hand upon Defarge's arm. Do you remember nothing of this man? Look at him. Look at me. Is there no old banker, no old business, no old servant, no old time rising in your mind, Monsieur Manette? As the captive of many years sat looking fixedly by turns at Mr. Lorry and at Defarge, some long obliterated marks of an actively intent intelligence in the middle of the forehead gradually forced themselves through the black mist that had fallen on him. They were overclouded again. They were fainter. They were gone. But they had been there, and so exactly was the expression repeated on the fair young face of her who had crept along the wall, to a point where she could see him, and where she now stood looking at him, with hands which at first had been only raised in frightened compassion, if not even to keep him off and shut out the sight of him, but were now extending toward him, trembling with eagerness to lay the spectral face upon her warm young breast, and love it back to life and hope. So exactly was the expression repeated on her fair young face that it looked as though it had passed like a moving light from him to her. Darkness had fallen on him in its place. He looked at the two less and less attentively, and his eyes, in gloomy abstraction, sought the ground and looked about him in the old way. Finally, with a deep, long sigh, he took up the shoe and resumed his work. "Have you recognized him, monsieur?" asked Defarge in a whisper. "Yes, for a moment. At first I thought it quite hopeless, but I have unquestionably seen for a single moment the face that I once knew so well." That he knew so well. Hush, let us draw further back. Hush. She had moved from the wall of the garret, very near to the bench on which he sat. There was something awful in his unconsciousness of the figure that could have put out his hand and touched him as he stooped over his labor. Not a word was spoken, not a sound was made. She stood like a spirit beside him, and he bent over his work. It happened at length that he had occasion to change the instrument in his hand for his shoemaker's knife. It lay on that side of him, which was not on the side on which she stood. He had taken it up and was stooping to work again when his eyes caught the skirt of her dress. He raised them and saw her face. The two spectators started forward. But she stayed them with the motion of her hand. She had no fear of his striking at her with the knife, though they had. He stared at her with a fearful look, and after a while his lips began to form some words, though no sound proceeded from them. By degrees in the pauses of his quick and labored breathing, he was heard to say, "What is this?" With the tears streaming down her face, she put her two hands to her lips, and kissed them to him, then clasped them on her breast as if she laid his ruined head there. "You are not the Gowler's daughter?" She sighed. "No." "Who are you?" Not yet trusting the tones of her voice, she sat down on the bench beside him. He recoiled, but she laid her hand upon his arm. A strange thrill struck him when she did so, and visibly passed over his frame. He laid the knife down softly, as he sat staring at her. Her golden hair, which she wore in long curls, had been hurriedly pushed aside and fell down over her neck, advancing his hand little by little. He took it up and looked at it. In the midst of the action, he went astray, and with another deep sigh, fell to work at his shoemaking. Not for long, releasing his arm, she laid her hand upon his shoulder. After looking doubtfully at it 2 or 3 times, as if to be sure that it was really there, he laid down his work, put his hand to his neck, and took off a blackened string with a scrap of folded rag attached to it. He opened this carefully on his knee, and it contained a very little quantity of hair, not more than 1 or 2 long gold hairs which he had, in some old day, wound off upon his finger. He took her hair into his hand again, and looked closely at it. It is the same. How can it be? When was it? How was it? As the concentrating expression returned to his forehead, he seemed to become conscious that it was in hers too. He turned her full to the light and looked at her. She had laid her head upon my shoulder that night when I was summoned out. She had a fear of my going, though I had none. And when I was brought to the North Tower, they found those upon my sleeve. You will leave me then. They can never help me to escape in my body, though they may in spirit. Those were the words I said. I remembered them very well. So he's thinking that this is his wife, That's sad. Also, what's up, Trig? A little late, but better late than never. He formed the speech with his lips many times before he could utter it. But when he did find spoken words for it, they came to him coherently, though slowly. How was this? Was it you? Once more the two spectators started. As he turned upon her with a sad, as he turned upon her with a frightful suddenness, she sat perfectly still in his grasp and only said in a low voice, I entreat you, good gentlemen, do not come near us, do not speak, do not move. Hark, he exclaimed, whose voice was that? His hands released her as he uttered this cry. He went up to his white hair, which they tore in a frenzy. It died out, as everything but his shoemaking did die out of him, and he refolded his little packet and tried to secure it in his breast. But still he looked at her, and gloomily shook his head. No, you are too young, too blooming, it can't be. See what the prisoner is. These are not the hands she knew. This was not the face she knew. This was not the voice she ever heard. No, she was, and he was, before the slow years of the North Tower ages ago. What is your name, my gentle angel? Hailing his softened tone and manner, his daughter fell upon her knees before him, with her appealing hands upon his breast. Oh, sir, at another time you shall know my name, and who my mother was, and who my father, and how I never knew their hard history. But I cannot tell you at this time. I cannot tell you here. All that I may tell you here now is, I pray to you to touch me and to bless me. Kiss me, oh, my dear, my dear. His cold white head mingled with her radiant hair, which warmed and lighted it as it were the light of freedom shining on him. If you hear it in my voice, I don't know that it is so, but I hope it is. If you hear it in my voice, any resemblance to a voice that once was sweet music to your ears, weep for it, weep for it. If you touch in touching my hair, anything that recalls my beloved head that lay on your breast when you were young and free, weep for it, weep for it. If when I hint to you of a home that is before us, where I will be true to you with all my duty and with all my faithful service, I bring back the remembrance of a home long desolate, while your poor heart pined away. Weep for it, weep for it. She's very sweet. This is lovely. She held him closer round the neck and rocked him on her breast like a child. If when I tell you, dearest dear, that your agony is over and that I have come here to take you away from it and that we go to England to be at peace and rest, and I cause you to think of your useful life laid waste and of our native France so wicked to you, weep for it, weep for it. And if when I tell you of my name and my father who is living and of my mother who is dead, and you learn that I have to kneel up to my honored father and implore his pardon for having never, for his sake, striven all day and lain awake and wept all night because of my poor mother, hidden in torture away from me, weep for it, weep for it. Weep for her then, and for me, good gentlemen. Thank God I feel his sacred tears upon my face, and his sobs strike against my heart. Oh, see, thank God for us, thank God. He had sunk in her arms, and his face dropped on her breast, a sight so touching, yet so terrible in the tremendous wrong and suffering which had gone before it, that the two beholders covered their faces. When the quiet of the garret had been long undisturbed, and his heaving breast and shaken form had long yielded to the calm that must follow all storms, emblem to humanity of the rest and silence into which the storm called life must hush at last, they came forward to raise the father and daughter from the ground. He had gradually dropped to the floor and lay there in lethargy, worn out. She had nestled down with him, that his head might lie upon her arm, and her hair drooping over him curtained from the light. If without disturbing him, she said, raising her hand to Mr. Lorry as he stooped over them, after repeated blows of his nose, all could be arranged for our leaving Paris at once, so that from the very door he could be taken away. But consider, is he fit for the journey? Asked Mr. Lorry. More fit for it, I think, than to remain in this city, so dreadful to him. Is it true, said Defarge, who was kneeling to look on and hear? More than that, Monsieur Manette is, for all reasons, best out of France. Say, shall I hire a carriage and post horses? That's business, said Mr. Lorry, resuming on the shortest notice to his methodical manner. And if business is to be done, I had better do it. Then be so kind, urged Miss Manette. as to leave us here. You see how composed he has become, and you cannot be afraid to leave him with me now. Why should you be? If you will lock the door and secure us from interruption, I do not doubt that you will find him, when you come back, as quiet as you leave him. In any case, I will take care of him until you return, and then we will remove him straight. Both Mr. Lorry and Defarge were rather disinclined to this course, in favor of one of them remaining. But as there were not only carriage and horses to be seen, but traveling papers, and as time pressed, for the day was drawing to an end, it came at last to their hastily dividing the business that was necessary to be done, and hurrying away to do it. Then, as the darkness closed in, the daughter laid her head down on the hard ground close at her father's side and watched him. The darkness deepened and deepened, and they both lay quiet until a light gleamed through the chinks in the wall. Mr. Lorry and Monsieur Defarge made all ready for the journey, and brought with them, besides traveling cloaks and wrappers, bread and meat, wine and hot coffee. Monsieur Defarge put this provender and the lamp he carried on the shoemaker's bench. There was nothing else in the garret but a pallet bed, and he and Mr. Lorry roused the captive and assisted him to his feet. No human intelligence could have read the mysteries of his mind in that scared blank wonder of his face. Whether he knew what had happened, whether he recollected what they had said to him, whether he knew that he was free, were questions no sagacity could have solved. They tried speaking to him, but he was so confused and so very slow to anger that they took fright at his bewilderment, and agreed for the time to tamper with him no more. He had a wild, lost manner of occasionally clasping his head in his hands that had not been seen in him before, yet he had some pleasure in the mere sound of his daughter's voice, and invariably turned to it when she spoke. In the submissive way of one long accustomed to obey under coercion, he ate and drank what they gave him to eat and drink, and he put on the cloak and other wrappings that they gave him to wear. He readily responded to his daughter's drawing her arm through his, and took it and kept her hand in both his own. They began to descend, Monsieur Defarge going first with the lamp, Mr. Lorry closing this little procession. They had not traversed many steps of the long staircase when he stopped and stared at the roof and round the walls. You remember the place, my father. You remember coming up here. What did you say? Or what did you say? But before she could repeat the question, he murmured an answer as if she had repeated it. Remember? No, I don't remember. It was very long ago. That he had no recollection whatever of his having been brought from his prison to that house was apparent to them. They heard him mutter, 105 North Tower. And when he looked about him, it evidently was for the strong fortress walls which had long encompassed him. On their reaching the courtyard, he instinctively altered his tread, as being in expectation of a drawbridge, and when there was no drawbridge, he saw the carriage waiting in the open street. He dropped his daughter's hand and clasped his head again. No crowd was about the door. No people were discernible at any of the many windows. Not even a chance passer-by was in the street. An unnatural silence and desertion reigned there. Only one soul was to be seen, and that was Madame Defarge, who leaned against the doorpost, knitting, and saw nothing. The prisoner had got into a coach, and his daughter had followed him, when Mr. Lorry's feet were arrested on the step by his asking, miserably, for his shoemaking tools and unfinished shoes. Madame Defarge immediately called to her husband that she would get them, and went, knitting, out of the lamplight through the courtyard. She quickly brought them all down and handed them in, and immediately afterward leaned against the doorpost, knitting, and saw nothing. This is so weird. Defarge got up the box and gave the word to the barrier, The postilion cracked his whip, and they clattered away under the feeble over-swinging lamps. Under the over-swinging lamps, swinging even brighter in the better street, and even dimmer in the worse, and by lighted shops, gay crowds, illuminated coffee houses, and theater doors, to one of the city gates, soldiers with lanterns at the guardhouse there. Your papers, travelers. See here, then, monsieur the officer, said Defarge, getting down and taking him gravely apart. These are the papers of monsieur inside with the white head. They were consigned to me with him at the... He dropped his voice. There was a flutter among the military lanterns, and one of them, being handed into the coach by an arm in uniform, the eyes connected with the arm looked, not in every day or in every night look, at Monsieur with the white head. It is well, forward, from the uniform, adieu from Defarge. And so, under a short grove of feebler and feebler overswinging lamps, out under the great grove of the stars, beneath that arch of unmoved and eternal lights, some so remote from this little earth that the learned tell us it is doubtful whether their rays have yet even been discovered, as a point in space where anything is suffered or done, the shadows of the night were broad and black, all through the cold and restless interval until dawn. They once more whispered in the ears of Mr. Jarvis Lorry, sitting opposite the buried man who had been dug out, and wondering what subtle powers were forever lost to him, and what were capable of restoration. The old inquiry. I hope you care to be recalled to life. And the old answer. I can't say. Strange. This is so strange. I feel a little lost, but I feel like I'm supposed to be lost. Like, he seems like he's been there for years. But why? That doesn't make any sense to me. Why has he been there for years? I guess that's the question that we're going to kind of figure out. So he was in prison for 18 years, but then why was he seemed like he was in that room for a long time. That's the thing that's confusing me. Oh, he just didn't realize he had been taken out of prison? Okay, that makes more sense to me then. Because that room kind of felt like a prison to him to some extent. Okay, that makes more sense. But the Defarges are strange. Okay, so his mind just wasn't ready to accept the change. Okay, that makes more sense to me then. Interesting. Strange stuff going on in the book right now. Yeah, the attic was a little short-term stop. Okay, that makes sense. I definitely thought that was a little strange. Like, he didn't really recognize where he was. I like the writing. It's a little bit more like you have to focus on this, which I don't mind. We're not getting to like social commentary and critique yet. I think we are a little bit in the beginning. But I don't know the characters quite yet. We have Jarvis Lorry, who is like, all about business. We have Monsieur Manette, who is very kind, very nice, very lovely. Has such a good heart. And then the Defarges, who seem grumpy, and she just doesn't notice anything, but she notices everything. We went to Jacques. I don't really know where this is going. Yeah, I don't really know where this is going, but it's fun. I'm kind of enjoying it now. So, all right, guys, we are 3 hours in. An old man in Shawshank Redemption who became institutionalized. It kind of felt like that to some extent. Like he was just so used to it that he just was doing his thing. All right, guys, I'm going to jump off. I'm going to get some work done. It was a pleasure as always. Next live read. I don't know when the next one's going to be. Maybe like Saturday? Probably not. Maybe Saturday. I don't know. We'll see. I did see that they're doing a Mary Bennett show. That kind of seems sweet. That'd be fun to check that out. I'm excited to get back to some Jane Austen too. But I like the writing of this book so far. The writing is pretty good. I'm enjoying the writing, but definitely the story is interesting. Got to figure out some stuff that's going on in the story. But for now, I'll see you guys in the next one. I don't know when the next one's going to be. I'll let you guys know on Discord if you're on Discord, and I'll try to schedule this out like, at least 24 hours in advance or around there. So I'll see you guys in the next one, and we'll see. We'll see. We'll probably do maybe do a weekend read. It's Easter this weekend, so we'll see. But all right, guys, have a good one, and